Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the greatest role model of all time for humankind. Ladies and gentlemen, the development of Islamic economy and finance in the world has shown a positive trend in the last decade. Apart from the Islamic financial industry, the development of Islamic economy and finance education is also encouraging. Based on Islamic Finance Indicator Reports, IFDI 2020, published by Refinitiv and ISDB, International Corporation Development, which is the subsidiary of Islamic Development Bank, Indonesia is listed as a country that has the largest number of Islamic economic and financial education institutions in the world. However, Indonesia is still listed as number 2 in terms of number of Islamic economic and financial research by the same report in 2020, and it is relatively not yet well known globally. Ladies and gentlemen, as a country with the largest Muslim population in the world and a strong foundation of Islamic economy and finance at the grassroots, Indonesia has the potential to become one of the center of Islamic economy and finance, both at the regional and global levels. This potential needs to be realized through comprehensive research-based policies that support the development of national Islamic economy and finance, as well as to achieve the country's vision of creating independent, prosperous Indonesia by becoming the global hub of Islamic economy and finance. Therefore, researchers in Indonesia, especially in the field of Islamic economics and finance, should be encouraged to produce more and more research papers, especially which are based on concrete evidences, so that the results can be adopted by the government. This is what we call as research-based policies. The quality and quantity of research are certainly very important to derive good policies for the acceleration of Islamic economic and financial sector development in the Republic. This is also stated in our master plan, the Indonesian Islamic Economic Master Plan 2019-2024, or known as MEXI, where one of the basic strategies to achieve the Indonesia's vision of Islamic economy, which is through strengthening research capacity. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the Islamic Finance Development Indicator IFDI 2020, as I have mentioned earlier, Indonesia is placed in the second place in the overall results. There are 5 criteria used by Refinitiv and ISDB to evaluate the countries, namely quantitative development, and then knowledge, which consists of research and also education, and then governance, and then also CSR, and as well as awareness. Last year, Indonesia was placed in the second position, up from 4th place in 2019 for the overall result. As we know, education and research play a very important role in the significant improvement of Indonesia's ranking in IFDI. However, from education and research, especially in the research field, most Islamic economic and financial studies still focus on Islamic banking research, both at the global level and also in Indonesian level. We can see this from the publication of ministries, institutions, and universities in Indonesia. If you go here, if you look here, Bank Indonesia, Perbankan Syariah, slowly, come here, okay. Perbankan Syariah is the biggest number of issues for the journal articles published in Bulletin Ekonomi, Moneter, and Perbankan. And also for Puskesmas, of course, about zakah, because dedicated for zakah. And if you look here for Al-Muzara'ah, which is the journal of IPB University, still Perbankan Syariah is listed the biggest number of topic, yeah, or the issues written by also similarly in Universitas Erlangga or Erlangga University, perbankan syariah or Islamic banking is listed in the top. Yeah. And also for ITB, Bandung Institute of Technology, especially the business school, perbankan syariah again is listed as the top hot topic, yeah, in the Journal of Business and Management. Next. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to improve the quality and quantity of Islamic economic and financial research in Indonesia, it is necessary to significantly increase the number of research papers indexed by reputable databases such as Scopus and WOS. Hopefully, through this online research workshop series, which will be held until the end of this year, many international quality papers will be produced by Indonesian researchers so that Indonesia's ranking in the Islamic economic research field will be enhanced in the near future. In addition, the papers are also expected to benefit KNEKS as the government entity responsible for the preparation of policies recommendation in order to accelerate development, the development of Islamic economy and finance in the Republic, as well as other stakeholders in the country. To close my speech, I welcome and encourage all of you, all the participants, to actively participate during the session and learn from our guru, and most importantly, to enjoy this workshop. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Sultan Emir, for your opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin our workshop, let me share you the short bio of Professor Mansur Ibrahim. Professor Mansur is currently a professor and deputy president, academic and dean at the International Center for Education in Islamic Finance, or INSIF, in Malaysia. He received his PhD in economics in 1996 from Washington University. His areas of interest include monetary macroeconomics, economic development, financial markets analysis, Islamic banking, and also finance, as well as the applied econometrics. Throughout his academic career, he has published his various scholarly, reputable international journals and conducted applied econometrics training for various institutions. For short, his achievements so far is actually, first, in 2020, Professor Mansur Ibrahim was ranked top 2% as scientist in the field of economics based on University Stanford research related to Scopus citation rank 2019. Professor Mansur also now is a guest editor on World Economy Journal and Pacific Basin Finance Journal. He is also an associate editor on Journal Economic Modeling. And ladies and gentlemen, this is very important why Professor Mansur now becomes our mentor for our workshop today is his Scopus H Index International is 20. So I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you will be very active in this workshop series and learn as much as you can to take so much knowledge from Professor Mansur. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the committee, we thank UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, University of Indonesia, IPB University, and also IAEI Jakarta for cooperating well in this international workshop series. Well, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we proceed to our first session, the research issues and overview. And without further ado, please welcome Professor Mansur Ibrahim.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya wal mursalin. وعلى آله ومن تبع بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Thank you, the chairpersons, Chitra, and Dr. Imer, the director of KNEKS. And then we have Prof. Muhammad Rianto Arif, Dr. Tika, Dr. Laili, and Dr. Ramatina, and many others that have assisted me in terms of making this workshop possible, and all the participants. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And again, thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are, even in these difficult times, we have the opportunity to be together in order to share ideas, right, among us, and with very single purpose, as has been mentioned, to promote Islamic banking and finance in general, and Islamic banking and finance in Indonesia in specifics through evidence-based research. Right? So this would be the first series of, I think, as I mentioned, throughout this year, toward the end of the year. Hopefully, by the end of the year, from the proposals that has been submitted, we can complete our first draft, or even our final draft, to be ready for submissions to journal articles. Right? Now, I have to emphasize the first that even if our focus is on journal articles, the journal article should not be the end of our objective, because the end of our objective is basically to come up with knowledge, to come up with applications that can have impacts on society in the field of Islamic banking and finance. Journal publication just the mediums, because doing research means that we try to gain knowledge, and once we gain knowledge, we have to disseminate that knowledge. And the best way to disseminate that knowledge is through Scopus journals, for very simple reasons, because of the wide coverage of the Scopus journals. People read Scopus journal worldwide, right? So people do not read, for example, the journal that are low rank, they are not Scopus. So for us to disseminate our knowledge that we have uncovered through our research, it is basically advisable for us to focus the journal that can reach a lot of people globally. And that's why I put here, we try to write an articles for the Scopus journals. And in these sessions, I will bring you through the overview and introductions. Right? Overview basically try to look at the proposal that you have submitted and give you some feedbacks, and then we discuss together your topics, your research objective, and try to look at whether we can do something better, or we can proceed with the topic that has been proposed as it is. Right? So I will bring you through. I will divide my sessions into 3 different parts. Right? And the first part, I will give you basically some expectations, right? And then discuss a little bit or bring back of what
Hello?
It seems Professor Mansur has a connection problem,
Oh,
or maybe my connection. I'm not sure also.
no, no.
The Professor Mansur video is freezing right now. Please, the chairperson, the chairwoman.
Yeah. You need
We're trying
you need to
to
contact him.
find the technical issues here.
Oh, now he's gone. Yeah, connection problem.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we are waiting for Professor Mansur to be back here. There's some technical happen there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, while we are waiting for Professor Mansur, for your information, that the 74 selected participants. Okay. Professor Mansur, are you there? Hello?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay. You were freezing.
Okay.
Right.
So yeah, I know. These are the risk of working from homes, right?
Yeah.
Because normally I will go to office, but then my office closed for the next 1 more weeks, and then maybe more weeks to be closed, right? So we cannot go to the office. But then the connections here, normally good connection, but sometimes they cut off. My apology. So if you experience this, just wait because they will connect me back. Now we have roughly 74 research topic that has been screened, and then based on the feedback that they have yesterday, basically there are 71 that has been registered, right? So we will try to take a look at. So we will go through the discussion of those research topics, not in details, but in light of what I'm going to discuss in terms of what are the elements of good empirical works, right? Good empirical papers, right? So I will discuss it a bit. I will provide you some feedbacks. Let us put some thought in terms of the topics or the objective that we try to do, right? And then the final sessions, right, I will demonstrate on how to write the introductions, right? I will give you a little bit on how to write introductions, and then I will give you assignments for the next series, right?
Kan datang Umi kemarin. Tidak kutanya-tanya aja itu pergi keluar.
The most important parts, right? The most important parts for writing, right, is to lay down clear-cut expectations, right? Now, as I mentioned, the submission for proposal, alhamdulillah, we receive very overwhelming response. We have more than 200, right? And we do the first screenings, and the first screening basically resulted in more than 90. And then we have the second screens, and the second screen I did on my own. We have more than 70. We still have, of the opinion is too many, and it may not be easy to mentor online for more than 70. But then when I look at the research topic, I give preference to the proposal that have a clear research hypothesis, and that I think that the research hypothesis can be developed based on the topic of the issues that has been suggested. But also I give some room for very key areas. I think Dr. Imer have shown quite clearly that right now the research has been mainly on the area of Islamic banking and Islamic capital markets. And it's no exception for the proposal that has been submitted. The highest number of proposals that I have received for screening is in the area of Islamic banking, and followed by Islamic capital markets. So still the same, and that's why I also give some rooms for those who are writing in the area of zakat, waqf, takafuls, and many other areas. Even if they use primary data, and I have to tell beforehand, when it comes to primary data and method analysis, I'm not well versed in terms of the methods of analyzing primary data, but I still can help you in terms of writing, right? Because when it comes to writing, right, it should be clear regardless of whatever you use, right, or whatever type of data. But I think the area of zakat, waqf, as well as takaful, other than Islamic banking, Islamic capital market, we also should focus. So that's why I also list quite many articles from those different areas, right? And the expectation that I have that with all of you, as well as expectation of myself, we have to understand that writing skill is a long journey. We are not born writer. No one of us born, or even after we go to, for example, high schools or university, we will become good writer. The answer is no. Writing skills is a long journey. Right? We have to practice a lot. People say practice make perfect, but in writing, even practice will not make you to be a perfect writer. It will make you to be a better writer from time to time, but you have to practice a lot, right? So it's basically, we have to take initial steps, and these are the initial steps that have been provided to you through KNEKS, right? These are the opportunity that you have. So it requires your commitments, and it requires that you must work hard. You must be ready to work hard. There's no shortcuts to upgrade ourselves in whatever we do. Right? It's no shortcut. The only criteria of success in my mind would be working hard. Right? And when you look at, for example, those who are successful right now, you see them successful. That is the fruit of working hard. Right? You can pick any areas. For example, you pick in the area of computer. Look at Bill Gates, for example. It's not something that comes out of the blue that he is successful, but he worked hard, spending hours and hours in the labs, right, coding the computers. You read this story of Bill Gates, for example, or even you go to music, the Beatles, for example, they practice thousands and thousands of hours, right, in Germany, and they become legends. You look at the sport, Michael Jordan, for example, in terms of basketball, working hard. The same thing with writing. So it requires from you the commitment and ready to work hard. And that's one really important part. This opportunity that has been provided, you are selected in terms of moving through the first and second screenings. Right? You have the first and second screenings. Take this opportunity, right? Commit yourself and work hard. And as far as I'm concerned, I will try to commit myself, because you look at, it's not easy. That if I have 70 proposals, when the introductions coming in, I have to assess 70 proposals. Let's say on average, every introduction 3 pages, have 210 pages. And I will have only 1 or 2 weeks to read all of those things. But inshallah, let's commit together to this workshop, so that at the end, we will come up with articles, right? And in the process, we learn along the way. We share our information and learn from you, from what you are writing or you are going to write. And then also you can learn from the little knowledge that I have, right? And the second one, which is very important for us to be able to move together smoothly, please adhere to the deadline, right? Because we are going to have step by step in terms of writing, right? Please adhere to the deadline, right? And we are going to have the deadline for the introductions, and we are going to come back and discuss the next steps, right? And I'm going to give you the deadline for the other parts, for example, to look at data, to look at the methods, right? And I will give you the deadline for performing analysis, to do literature review, and so on. You must adhere to the deadline, right? Because everyone have to move together, right? Because it will not be fair for someone who are ahead, for example, meet the deadline, but then our attention have to be given to those who have not yet completed introductions when we are discussing, for example, the method to be used. So everyone have to adhere to the deadline, right? And the third one, right, starting from today, right, inculcate in yourself the reading habits. Very important, right? Because sometimes our topics that we write, or even introductions that we write, it provides reflections whether we read a lot or not on that topic, right? So it's basically reading is a key. And in fact, reading is a key to research in every part of research that we do, right? So it's very important for you to read journal articles. When I say journal article, not any journal articles, right? Journal articles from good journals. Right? Inshallah, our committee here, together with myself, we try to help you as much as possible to get whatever journal articles that you need, right? Because sometimes we understand the fact that your institutions may not have access to the articles, right? But we can share the articles, right? Because in terms of universities, for example, they have interlibrary loans, right? So among ourselves, we can make that interloans of the journal articles, right? But then you must be working in order to find the right articles for you to read. But you must read the articles, right? Now, our focus will be on writing, right? But then I also would be able to advise you on some other parts, for example, what method to use, right? Or in terms of interpretation of results and so on, right? If the research fall under my areas of expertise, right? Or employs econometric modeling. As I mentioned before, I do not know everything. The area is so diverse, right? We have zakat. I'm not in zakat research, for example, but I can provide you the feedback in terms of writing, right? But I would like to read article in writing so that I can learn also from you. So both of us will get benefits. But you have to understand the fact that I may not know everything. I may not be able to provide you all answers, right? But then we are going to search for the answers together, whatever obstacle or whatever problem arise in the process of writing, right? So that's basically the expectation. We focus on writing, but then if it can help you on other part than writings, I will be happy to, right? And you have submitted, some of you submitted the whole thesis, right, for me to look at. Some of you submitted 2 pages, some of you submitted longer, right? Now, for these workshops, let's start from scratch, right? Which means that let's forget of what you have written before, right? But the contents, do not forget about the content, but the way you write before in your thesis or in your proposal, let's forget that for a moment. Just start from scratch and go through with me and go through together on building our papers part by part, right? So as I mentioned, just remember the facts, the contents of what you have submitted, but do not look at the way that you have written, right? Later on, maybe at the end, we can go back what you have written before with what the outcome that we have after these workshops, after 5 months, for example, and let's see whether we can see the difference in terms of our writing or not. So that the expectations that I have from all of you, right? The chairpersons, I'm not sure whether in terms of the Q&A, should we be at the end or should we open up along the way? Because I see someone raise hand.
Just go on, Professor.
Okay. I think if someone want to ask, for example, you can type in the chats, right? But then I already reserved basically the second session. We are going to discuss a lot, and then the end, so we are going to have Q&A. So let's proceed in terms of looking at. So these are my expectations, right? There's no substitute for working hard. So we have to work hard in terms of learning the skills, right? And you have to remember a long journey, but every long journey have to start with the first step, right? And when we start the step, please make commitments. And very important, these are the opportunity that has been provided to more than 70 of you, right? Where we have more than 200 that have submitted the proposal. And I also understand the fact that we have the public participants here, whose papers, who are interested to listen, but also who may have some topic to do, you also can follow more or less the same things, right, in terms of the step that we have done. Who knows, for example, out of 300, more than 300 that are listening, there are few good articles that can come out from there, right? So these are basically the expectation that I have, right, throughout the 6 months, right? And I have been writing for 25 years. It's not easy. I'm still basically would like to improve my writing, and that's why I still keep on reading, try to look at the way that people write their article and so on, try to learn from them. In fact, last Friday I also attended a workshops, I think by Bank Indonesia Institute on writing for Scopus journal, because I also have to learn from someone else that are more or that are highly published, that have higher each index, for example. So we have to keep on learning, and we have to be persistent in what we do. So that the expectation that I have from all of you. Now, when it comes to elements of good research, for example, of good research, right? Because I want to put this one here, because I want to take this and evaluate back, right, what you have submitted, right? And what I would like to evaluate back what you have submitted, right, are the one that I highlight in red here, right? Are the hypotheses that you make here, are they stated explicitly? The hypothesis that you try to look at in your work, right? And then I would like to look at in the context of data, right? So these are 2 points that I will give you feedback based on the submission that you have given me. Are the hypothesis here stated explicitly? And in fact, I will add a little bit more. Are they enough? Are they sufficient as a scope of an article? Or there are too many, right? Are there too many? So I'm going to look at, I'll try to provide feedback to each one of you, right? But then only briefly. But then I also will open up the discussions if you need to get some feedback related to the topic that you have submitted. And then I would like to look at your hypothesis. Can that be measured, basically, or can that be tested, right? Which basically related to the third point that highlighted in red here, the data available or not, right? Or you have sufficient data or not. Right? And one of the things that I observed in terms of your focus, right, is basically heavily focused on Indonesian case, right? It's good to focus on Indonesia because we can learn something that are specific to Indonesia, right? But then, do you have enough data for you to get convincing results? Because some focus that you have in your proposal, right, you may face data constraints. Once you have data constraints, you may not be able to test your hypothesis convincingly, right? When you are not able to test your hypothesis convincingly, for example, then in terms of getting good results that are publishable, for example, maybe the likelihood may be low, right? So I try to look at these two. The other part will come up next in terms of writing the introductions, whether you have critical basis for your hypothesis, whether what you try to do have some practical relevance, right? Are they important for policy formulations? Are they important for investors? Are they important for business firms? Do they have academic relevance? Right? Do they, for example, what you are doing right now into results add to our understanding, right? Add to our knowledge. So basically, we try to look at your contributions. So these are the initial questions that you have to raise in light of the elements of the research that we look at. Yeah. So when you look at your research, of course, these are basically the contents of your articles, right? You have introductions. Right? Basically, people would like to look at what are your research objectives, what are motivations, what are your contributions, what gap that you try to fill, right? So basically, the work that you try to write, for example, is not something simply, okay, someone have done something, and would like to do exactly the same thing for the case of Indonesia, right? You must have motivations, right? Because research is basically motivated by the problems, right? By the problem that we face, motivated by our desire to understand more, right, of the current situations. So you must have that motivations, right? Research is not motivated by, I want to publish a good article, right? As I mentioned, publishing article is a way of disseminating knowledge, and we should publish in Scopus journal. But our research should be motivated by our desire to look at the problem and solve the problem, provide solutions, provide policy recommendations. So whether you have that in your introductions or not, right? What are your motivations? What are your contributions? What are the gaps in the knowledge that we try to fill in, right? That we try to fill in, because a lot of work has been done, but then what extra little bit thing that we try to add in? So these are type of things that we have to think when it comes to introductions, right? So I will not focus all of them because this will be assignment that you have to look at for the next topic. But the first thing I will focus on research objective as what you have submitted to us, right? And then when you look at literature review, right, very important also, right? Because literature review tell people whether we are familiar with the topics or not, right? We are familiar with the topics or not. And literature review also tell readers regarding what do we know so far, right? And literature review also link back to the gap that we try to fill. These are what we know so far. And then I would like to add some more things because what they have done before, they miss certain points and you try to add it in your work, right? So these are important also as part of your articles, right? Method and results, right? Which will be done later on. We try to look at how appropriate our methods, right? When we get the result, what are the intuitions behind that, right? Because our work cannot be just numbers, cannot be just statisticals, right? You have this Y affect X or X affect Y and X significantly related to Y, for example. It cannot be just that. You have to provide intuition because intuitions basically provide us insight and knowledge, right? How convincing your result, how robust your result. So those are kind of things we try to look at. So these are elements of good work, right? The contents of your work must be clear in terms of motivations, contributions, must be clear how you fit in the existing literature that we have, and then your methods must provide convincing results, right? Convincing results. So these are type of things that make article to be good. And the one that we focus on writing, right? When you have all of these things, but if your writing doesn't have a good scripts, right? The plot of your writing is not good. People are confusing. The flow of writing is not good, right? You are not neat in your writing, for example, right? Even citation not standard, right? For example, because the writing reflect how careful you are in conducting research, right? If you make table which is not neat, right? And you make tables which are so different from one table to the next, for example, right? People start doubting you whether if even in writing part you are not neat, the flow are not good, and people will doubt you whether you pay much attention to your research or not in terms of the method that you use, the result that you use, the model building that you have, and so on. So that's why we're important, right? And in fact, writing also key components of a good research, right? Of course, when I said absence of mistake, it means absence of major mistakes, right? So these are basically the elements of good research that we have to look at. right? And we are going to move one by one in terms of good research, right? I put here that throughout the year we are going to focus one by one, basically, and bring you through, so that at the end we are going to have some number of papers. I have my own target. Of course, I have 71 in front of me, but I have my own targets, right? Because I do not think, based even on my own experience, for example, even my own writing, if I write 3 articles at the same time, after 6 months, not all 3 will be completed, right? It may be 1 completed, or it may be 2 completed, but rarely I will complete all of them, right? So I have certain target in terms of percentage, but hopefully, right, since we have 71 of you, and each of you have only 1, hopefully all of you complete at the end, right? Inshallah, we move together, and hopefully all of you complete. Now, I would like to focus on whether the hypothesis is clear or stated explicitly, that our hypothesis measurable, are data available and sufficient. So those are the 2 that we would like to focus on this part, right? And based on what I have looked at, these are just, I put just some hypotheses in there just to give you some idea of what I found out from your proposals, right? Now, research objective, and sometimes research objective reflect your hypothesis. You must be explicitly and clearly stated, right? So hypothesis is nothing more than the expectations or the prediction to be tested. You have expectations, you have predictions that you would like to test, and normally it will involve relations between variables, right? And it's normally stated in terms of research objective, right? And that must be clearly stated, right? We look at the example, I just pick up some example from the proposal that has been submitted to me. This research aims to see how the performance of Islamic banking and conventional banking compares during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's basically, you have the context, COVID-19 pandemics. You have looked at, you would like to look at, during this period, for example, that you want to look at the performance of Islamic banking and conventional banking, where performance can be referred to the risk of the banks or the profitability of the bank, efficiency of the bank. So those are performance, right? But right now it's not so clear yet what are the performance that you are looking at, and normally will be made clear in the introductions. So these are the example of research objective which has been stated clearly. You would like to look at the impact of this pandemic on the performance, and you want to make comparison between Islamic banking and conventional banking, right? And same thing, to analyze the effect of Syariah financial index on macroeconomics, right? Now, here, you look at the second one, for example, when you say the effect of Syariah financial index on poverty, very clear, right? Because when I read this objective, for example, I know clearly that you are going to have something that has been termed as Syariah financial index. You have poverty. But when you say on macroeconomics, this one not clear, because macroeconomic is too broad, right? And the word macroeconomic itself may not be proper here, because macroeconomic is the study of macro, right? The study of the aggregate behavior, right? The study of economic system. So when you say macroeconomic, now become not clear. So the second examples, right, stated clearly, but not all stated in terms of research objective, but not all are clear in terms of what you have here, right? Now, the third one here, you said, some said this research aims to provide empirical evidence that various types of bank supports have an influence on SME export performance, particularly halal foods and Muslim fashion industry. Right? Now, if you look at this objective, right, people will kind of try to wonder, your objective to look at SME performance, but you are going to provide specific focus on halal foods and Muslim fashions, right? And then you want to look at various types of supports, right? Now, these are not clear. When you say various types of support, what do you mean by various types of supports, right? Are you going to look at export of all SME, but you are going to pay attention more specific to food? Or are you going to look at only halal food and Muslim fashions? So these are the example of the hypothesis, which can be, you have the hypothesis. You try to look at, right? Basically, you try to look at the relationship between bank support with export performance. But then the investigation itself, the area that you try to look at, are not so clear what specifically that you try to look at. Right? And the other example I can give you to investigate the borrower's characteristic that have an impact on the default risk, Islamic peer-to-peer lending during COVID-19 crisis. Right? A very good hypothesis. You want to look at borrower's characteristics, right? But then for this topic, I have more feedback to give, but I just give you some examples, right? Measuring financial performance of Indonesia Islamic banking during COVID-19 outbreaks, right? Indonesia banking. So you try to look at financial performance. Finding factors impact to financial performance of Indonesia Islamic banking during COVID-19 and stock market performance. So these are some of the examples that I would say is quite clear in terms of performance, but it can be improved further for some of them that we have here. Right? So I will go through this hypothesis, the proposal that you have submitted, and we try to discuss together whether the hypothesis that you have there, right, are clear or not, have good scope or not. And one more thing that I would like to suggest to you to put some thoughts, right? To put some thought, for example, in terms of looking at your objective and your hypothesis, right? If you look at here, for examples, right? The first objective that I put here, right? Performance of Islamic banking, conventional banking during COVID-19 pandemic, the sample, the Indonesian banking sector. Here also the same thing, Indonesia. Here also the same thing, Indonesia, right? And the same thing for all these COVID-19 interests and how they impact basically Islamic peer-to-peer and so on, all are Indonesians, right? Now, see, put some thoughts, right, on your objective, especially those who have focused on Indonesia, right? Put some thought, because some of them, I think, right, you can make it bigger, right? Do not say for this one, because to investigate borrowers' characteristics, peer-to-peer lending, for example, these are quite unique topics. Of course, you cannot open up to many other countries. But for example, for this one, measuring financial performance of Indonesian Islamic banking during COVID-19 outbreaks, right? Is there any possibility, for example, because Islamic banking is not only in Indonesia, but also in many other countries, right? Why not open up your sample to all other countries, right? Why I say this to be important, right? The first one, right, looking at Indonesian Islamic banking alone, right, using secondary data, you may not have a good data points for you to come up with good results, right? And second one, if you are able to incorporate data from many other countries, right, you can broaden your scope of the analysis, right? Because there are differences between countries. Maybe they will allow you to be able to look at Right? These are very important. Just throw the idea. They allow you to look at whether, for example, financial inclusion, some of you have that topic on financial inclusion, whether the difference of financial in each country that you look at will result in differences in the impact of COVID-19 on Islamic banking performance, for example, which means that you can broaden your objective. Just not simply look at financial performance of Islamic banking. I'm not sure how you want to do it, but most likely I would say you are going to use econometrics, and then you are going to use dummy variable COVID-19 period and try to compare with, and run the analysis and try to compare with non-COVID-19. Right? That's my best guess on how you do it. But then how many banks that you are going to have? If you use, for example, commercial bank, Islamic commercial bank in Indonesia, for example, I do not think you are going to have 20 of them. Right? So I'm not sure that in terms of data point. Right? But the last reading that I have regarding Indonesian Islamic Bank, I think last year, you have roughly 13 or 14 Islamic bank, but right this year, I'm not sure. Right? You know better about Islamic banking, but then what I try to say here, you may not get data to be sufficient. Why not put some thoughts in terms of data point, expand it, right? For example, some studies that try to look at stock market performance, but they try to look at index. You look at index, you look at only one index, let's say the Indonesian stock market index, right? But then it's quite small scopes that you try to address, right? Try to look at stock market performance during COVID as compared to during non-COVID, but based on one index. How much you can discuss, how much you can say, right? The best part, the conclusion that you can make, the stock market is affected, right, by such and such due to COVID, right? So try to think of the way, for example, dividing, not looking at the index, because I see some of the articles, they try to look at index. By looking at, for example, sectoral index, or even by looking at industry levels, right? Because different industry will be affected differently, right? Or by looking at the firms that have different type of characteristics, big firms, small firms, right? Big caps, small caps, and so on. So try to look more so that you can add more scope and you can get more insight, right? Because by just looking at the index alone, it may not be sufficient, right? And some of the work that you have suggested, or for example, some of the work, I think that sometimes you have too many objectives. I will highlight the one that have too many objectives and so on, and we can discuss, right? So, but the idea, the general finding that I get, my view that I get from reading your proposal that you have submitted, right? Some of them you have to reformulate your hypothesis, make it clearer. Some of them you have to relook back at your hypothesis. Is that enough for one article? Some of them you may have to cut down your hypothesis. There are too many hypotheses that you try to put in, right? Some of them have 3 hypotheses, but they seem to be disconnected from each other. So these are type of things that I have obtained from the proposal that you have submitted. So let's refine that. Let's look at one by one after this, right, in the context of your hypothesis, right? And the second part, right, in terms of data, right, you have hypothesis that you try to look at, right? And then, of course, hypotheses need to be tested using data. Some of you have primary data, especially in the area of wakaf, zakat, and takaful. When it comes to Islamic capital market, Islamic banking, or financial economic or monetary economics, for example, majority or most of the papers using secondary data, right? But then those in zakat, wakaf, mainly they use primary data. Right? It's okay, it's whether primary or secondary data. I don't want to go into the debate of which one is better. As long as they allow you to test your hypothesis, that one's good enough. right? So when it comes to data, you have to look at, are they measurables? Okay. Some of you try to look at the ethics, right, of the bank, right? The ethical codes of the bank. Are those measurables? And that one really important, right? The one that I've looked at, Syariah Financial Index. Right? Can you come up with a measure of Syariah Financial Index? That one really important. Are they available? Right? That one really important too. Right? That you have things on writing, because you should not put your effort on writing when you are not clear with the data are there or not, right? Because we are afraid that you have write so good proposals, good introductions, come up with a good methods, but once you go and try to collect data, data is not sufficient, right? You end up with short data set with small number of banks, right? Small number of firms, for example. So you have to look at, you have to think also whether data are available or not. And then whether the data are sufficient, as I mentioned. If you look at just Indonesian data set, for example, are they sufficient? So these are type of things that you have to look at in the context of hypothesis and data point, right? So for all of you, these are my two observations that I have, and I will discuss one by one in the second sessions. Right? We are not going to have breaks, but then we are going to continue, but we are going to be more relaxed, more of discussing modes. So this is just my opening up my observation that I have with respect to the proposal that you have submitted. And I do not focus on everything because I just want to look at your objective and hypothesis. And I would like to zoom into basically what type of data that you use. Are they available? Are they sufficient? So those are type of things that I would like to focus first. So I will stop here first. I will open up for Q&A for this first part before I go to the second part of my presentations. Right? And I think please feel free. Do not worry. All of us are learning. And in fact, I love to do this thing because of different topics that you have done. And I can learn from you. I can read your Zakat article. I can read your Wakaf articles. Even I can read one article on the spin-off of Windows to become subsidiaries. What might be the impact? Those are quite interesting to look at, right? So these are type of things that we have to be clear into. And in fact, I have to add one more expectation. Try to be as informal as possible, right? Academic ideas, research ideas, right? Or whatever discussions, whatever topic that you have, will not come up in a very formal setting. It will be come up when we talk informally, right? Informally. And that's why one of Nobel laureate winner, I forgot the names, he wrote his own biography, and he said he loves so much of University of Chicago, not because of the student in the classroom or not because he teach in that big universities, but because of informal setting, the tea break, the conversation that you have with the student during the tea breaks, with the other colleague during tea break, and those informal interactions basically generate a lot of ideas. So try to be as informal as possible. And I think being Asians, one thing regarding being Asians, we have so much power distance, which means we respect authority, right? But then in academics, if you look at, because I'm trained in the US, as what has been mentioned by the chairpersons, we do not call our professors as professors such and such, right? We call our professors by their nicknames, right? How informal we are, for example, right? If someone named William, we call Bills. Someone named Robert, we call Robs, right? So these are the name that we call our professors there. So informal. So do not be afraid, be informal, and we discuss. So I would like to open up for Q&A for roughly 5 or 10 minutes. If you have Q&A regarding of what I have presented so far, because the next thing I will go through one by one. It will be a long journey, 71 articles I put in here. We'll go to one by one, briefly highlighting of what I think what I think is related to the topic that you have presented, the objective that you have presented. Okay, so let me stop here first and get Q&A from you.
Well, mashallah, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Mansur, for your extensive explanation for this session. Well, currently we already have 2 questions, Professor, from the chat box. Let me read it for you. First is from Mr. Purwanto. He asked that, is it possible to modify or change the proposal?
Okay, yes, your proposal here should not be final because I want you to rethink back about your proposals, right? You can change your proposal, but then your assignment that have been given, you have to follow the assignment that have been given. The objective also can be changed because it's not something carved on stones, right? I think you can change your proposals, right? But then once you submit your introductions and so on, because these are just the feedback on your objective proposal. Because once you listen or once we discuss today, you may think that based on the feedback that I have, I would like to do this rather than the other. For example, yes, it's possible, right? But then once we go through the introductions and so on, when you write introductions, it is better for you to stick with proposal. But at this stage, the answer is yes.
Okay.
And the second one here, right,
yeah,
regarding PowerPoint, yes, we are going to send you because I already have PowerPoint, but then I mentioned to Dr. Yunanja that I will provide PowerPoint as well as some other materials after the workshop because I would like you to focus on the workshop first rather than on printing PowerPoint, right? Just focus on the workshop first and then we'll give you PowerPoints, each one of you. Right? And how is the research objective if we are from legal background or faculty of law, right? That's usually focused on normative-based knowledge to be published in a good, reputable economic international journals, right? Now, okay, I have no idea about law research, right? I have seen article in law, right? Which is totally different because they go by cases and they have a lot of footnotes when they discuss things and so on because that's the format of law articles, right? But if you want to publish in economic international journals, if you are from the law, for example, right? My best suggestion would be you have to team up with someone from economics, right? Because law is important for economics, right? And in fact, there are journals, right? For example, Journal of Economics and Laws, right? That put them together, right? Journal of Banking Regulations. They have that journal that look at regulation, but on banking. So there are certain, in banking, for example, there are certain index that are related to rules, regulations, that still you can use quantitative analysis, right? So if you want to publish in economics international journals, for example, you still can focus on the law subject, but but then, right? But then you have to have some data on certain aspects of law, right? For example, in banking, few articles that I'm writing, I focus on banking regulation that look at, for example, activity restrictions, that look at, for example, supervisory power, that look at capital requirements. So those are rules and regulations, and this type of article will be acceptable in economic journals that have the law elements, right? But as part as the pure law research is concerned, I have to apologize. I'm not so well versed as part of those. Right? Someone said, "What is the current research trends in Islamic banking? Should we follow the trends if we intend to publish in Scopus Index Journal?" Okay. Now, look, if you want to publish in Scopus Index Journal, you have to write on something that people are interested right now. Right? People are interested, right? But then that doesn't mean that you have to shift your focus. Let's say you are interested in Islamic banking. I am interested, my area in monetary economics, right? But then my work right now, when it comes to monetary economics, for example, there are various areas that people are interested. For example, they are interested in SDG, income inequality, right? They are interested in the environments. They are interested in fintechs. They are interested in the impact of COVID-19. But my work is still in Islamic banking, right? For example, in my recent work that I look at, I still write on monetary economic, but I link to income distribution, for example, right? So basically, you must be truthful to your areas, but then you have to look at in your areas, what are people, what are the interests of the people right now? Which means that you have to read the articles in the journals that are recently published. What are people looking at, right? And if you look at in Islamic banking, for example, right, people become more and more interested, not so much to look at comparison between Islamic banking and finance. Few articles still coming out, but then less and less attention has been given. Why? Because there are a lot of articles that has been published starting from 2000s, right? More than 10 years, people try to compare Islamic banking and finance. Now people are interested more in terms of looking at, okay, what are the contribution of Islamic bankings in terms of financial stability, in terms of poverty, in terms of reducing income inequality, for example. People are interested more in terms of those parts. And can Islamic finance, for example, be hedging against uncertainties? Right? For example, if you put in Syariah compliant index your investments, are you protected, for example? Right? So those are type of things that people are looking at. Right? So yes, you have to follow the trends, but then stick into your own areas. Right? That you try to look at. Right? And based on empirical research, do we have to get the data first, then process it and make the paper, or write a proposal first and look for the data, right? Now, see, you must have the topic first, you must have some ideas first, but then you should not be oblivious of data. What I try to say here is that in the back of your mind, right, you must see that data available, right? If you get data first, it's also possible, right? But sometimes we do not want to go into a situation where you get data, you perform analysis first, and you go back and write the paper, right? You write the paper after you get the result. You write hypothesis after you get the result. Is that not a good way of writing? Because your writing must start with hypothesis first, must start with theoretical foundation first. But in back of your mind, you must be aware of the fact that data is important, right? So perhaps my suggestion would be try to do them at the same time, right? While you are looking at your topic, try to research also on the data, whether those data are available or not, right? So those are things that need to be done at the same time. Even to read the literature review, for example, you need to do them at the same time, right? So these are my answer to what you have asked in the chats, right? Anything else that you have, right?
Yes, Professor, there are also questions in the Q&A box.
Okay.
Let's read for you. First,
Yeah.
from one, what is the ideal number of hypotheses and objectives per research articles? I have seen some 5, some even just 2 or 3. Like that.
Okay. Now, if you ask me, for example, right, the research objective, if you ask me, very simple, right? I will have only one research objective in one article, but under that research objective, one objective, right, there are sub-objectives, which means I would like to go in depth for that one objective, right? I will give you examples, right? I will give you examples. The work that I'm writing right now, where I also see one of you suggest this proposal, right? These are the one that I'm writing right now, and I'm doing my literature review. I try to look at the impact of financial inclusions on income distributions, right? And that's my work. And my data points, of course, is different from you because you focus on Indonesia. I focus on all middle income countries, lower middle income and upper middle income countries. That's my focus. So I have only one objective. But under that one objective, I have sub-objective because I want to go further, right? Because my query is financial inclusion may be good, right, for income distributions if you are in a good time, right, which means that if you are in the expansion phase. What happens if you are in bad times? Right? Will income in financial inclusions, right, make income distribution to be better or to be worse during the bad times, right? So my hypothesis is still one, but I will go into more details, right, in terms of the aspect of that hypothesis, right? So for me, that one would be sufficient, right? But if you have to have multiple hypotheses, for example, right? Let's say some of you have 4 hypotheses. I remember one article had 4 hypotheses. They would like to look at borrowers' characteristics and how it affects defaults in peer-to-peer lending. They would like to look at loan characteristics. They would like to look at institutional investors' characteristics. And they would like to look at macroeconomics characteristics. So you have 4 objectives, right? 4 objectives. Are there too many, for examples, right? Are those too many? And you can ask yourself, for example, among those 4 objectives, for example, which are of most critical importance, right? That you can focus and provide deeper analysis. Because you have to remember the fact that journal article is not a thesis. Thesis, they require to have 3, 4, 5 objectives because you have to write a lot of chapters and so on. But journal article, they would like you to look at one specific problems, but go in deep details in that problems, right? To go rigorously in that problems. So for me, the ideal one objective is enough. But under that objective, you must have some details or some sub-objective that are related to that objective, right? So hopefully you understand what I try to say here into objective. Because normally people look at, right, the impact of X on Y. And then the sub-objective, they look at the impact of X on Y in different type of countries, right? Whether the impact will be the same or not the same. Different time periods, whether the impact will be the same or not the same, right? So you have to go into that depth. But if you don't want to go to that depth, then you can have multiple objectives. But I will not advise you to have more than 3 objectives, in fact, right? You can take a look at most articles that you read, for example, they have only one objective, but they go into details by having sub-objectives that are related to the main objective, right? So that's what we have, right? For the qualitative research, right, is it the hypothesis also should be measurable? Qualitative research is different than quantitative research, right? And you look at, for qualitative research, for example, it can be done through observations. Ethnographic research, for example, totally different things. And qualitative research, by the word itself, is not quantifiable, right? It's not quantitative, right? So for qualitative, your hypothesis, basically you don't need to have data. But then I do not know much about qualitative research, right? But then I know for sure that qualitative research doesn't require measurements, right? But then it requires some other approach, which are also scientific, right? So this one, I think, I would say I will not be able to guide you in fact in terms of qualitative research because, but sometimes you have to remember that people confuse about qualitative research in the sense that people say that survey data is qualitative research, but survey data can also be quantitative. When you get data from survey, that allow you to make the analysis, right? Qualitative, there are so many different types. The only thing that I know, ethnographic, for example, when you follow your subjects and you observe and you make basically inferences from what you have observed, right? So that's basically the qualitative research that I know of, right? It's a must to have hypothesis to be tested. Of course, you don't have hypothesis what you want to test, right? Because any article must have hypothesis, and hypothesis must be grounded in theories, right? Must be grounded in theories, right? Now, for examples that they say, comparing farmers' productivity who pay zakat and who does not pay zakat on their life, right? These are the examples, very interesting examples, right? But see, I know your hypothesis here, right? I know your hypothesis here because those who pay zakat have a lot of blessings, right? Have a lot of blessings, okay? So they should be more productive. So that's your theory behind that, right? But then you have to be careful of this type of hypothesis, right? When it's related to blessings coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because blessing can come in many different forms, not just productivity, right? What would happen, right? What would happen, okay? If you get the results that people who pay zakah is less productive, right? So what implications of that? Now, I'm saying this because far back, I think 20 years back, there was one article that has been published, right? And later pulled back due to criticism that has been made by many others. And that article tried to measure the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using the concept of productivity, using the concept of stochastic frontier production functions, right? And people say, how can you measure the blessings, right? What would happen if, right, in Muslim countries, right, from the measurements that has been forwarded, blessing is less. So our conclusion would be what, right? So you have to be careful a little bit when you want to come up with certain objective, right? But then when you say this, must we have hypothesis? Yes, you must have hypothesis. Test itself is to test the hypothesis. And this hypothesis must be grounded by theories, right? That's why when we look at the research itself, for examples, right? And that's why Islamic banking and finance, right? A lot of work try to compare Islamic banking and conventional banking, right? And many of the works, right, they find the result to be the same, right? So their conclusions that there's no difference between Islamic banking and finance. And they go further one more step. They say Islamic banking is not Islamic because they converge into the behavior of conventional banking, right? That is something dangerous, right? Basically, something dangerous to basically to states, right? Because Islamic banking is as profitable as conventional banking. That doesn't make Islamic banking to be the same as conventional banking. Just because Islamic banking have the same risk as conventional banking, that doesn't make Islamic banking to be the same from Islamic point of view as conventional banking, right? What they said, just Islamic banking is as risky as conventional banking, nothing more and nothing less. So sometimes we try to test things, right? But then in terms of conclusions, we bring it quite far from what the test can be done. But coming back to this one, right? When it comes to hypothesis, do you have to have hypothesis? The answer is yes.
Yeah, Professor, we prioritize the questions from panelists first. So there is one panelist who raised her hand. Miss Poppy. Wait a minute.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Chair Lady. Pak Mansur, may I call you Pak Mansur?
I think
Yes.
Prof. Mansur is freezing.
Okay.
For this, we will. I see that there are two questions more from panelists in the chat box. We will ask Professor Mansur. He is will to answer all the questions and then proceed to the next session or not. Well, while we still have to wait for Professor Mansur, let me remind you, all the participants, panelists, and attendees, please fill the attendance form. That the link we already give you the link in the
Okay.
Professor. You're there.
So those are basically what I try to say. You must have hypothesis for you to be able to test. But then your hypothesis that you have stated, you have to be clear about your hypothesis, whether they are measurable or not, whether it can be tested or not. Right? So the answer for that one, yes, you must have hypothesis. Okay. So
Yeah,
hopefully,
Professor,
yeah.
there's one panelist that raised her hand and would like to ask a question from you.
Sure.
Is it
sure.
okay?
Sure.
Please, please proceed, Miss Poppy.
Thank you, Mbak Citra. Thank you, Pak Mansur. May I call you Pak Mansur?
Yeah, sure. No problems.
Pak Mansur, hearing your presentation, I already know my shortcoming of my proposal.
Okay.
So, you mentioned that our aims is to have also the dissemination of the application. So it should be have the implication. But from my conceptual framework, I saw that there is no policy implication or policy formation derived from my result. So should I make additional what do you call it? Further research on that. So just not only one objectives, but two objectives. One is from that result, and then come to the next step to make a formulation of the policy formulation. My research is about wakaf, Pak Mansur.
Okay,
Faktor
but wakaf, but what exactly the focus that you have about wakaf?
the intention to do wakaf, cash
Okay.
wakaf. So only that, just to know the intention of the one who participate in the cash wakaf, but there's no policy information after that. Reading from my
I think basically I remember there are basically the intentions to do wakaf, for example, right? Now,
yeah.
you look at, I'm not sure whether you wakaf one ataupun wakaf general wakaf that you are looking at.
Mine is cash wakaf.
Cash wakaf, right?
Is
So
yeah,
the intention to do cash wakaf. See,
yes.
you see when you that article, you know, you are going to use primary data, right?
Yes, primary data.
Primary data. Now, in your analysis, I would say that you try to look at, you try to gather data, and from your data point, you are going to get basically, let's say you ask many individuals, right? And from those many individuals that you have asked, I'm not sure, these are just my visualization when I read your proposal, right? You are going to get some people who have contributed to cash wakaf, some people who have never contributed to cash wakaf, right?
Yes.
And then that you ask them, and then you are going to look at also their characteristics, right? Their characteristics, right? You are going to look at their age, for examples, right?
Yes.
You are going to look at their income. You are going to
Yes.
look at whether they are female or males, for examples, right?
Mm.
Now, you are going to get a lot of characteristics, and from those characteristics you get from your survey data, you set up your hypothesis, right? You set up your hypothesis based on whatever your conceptual framework. Let's say the older you are more likely to contribute to cash wakaf. You have more intentions, right? So let's say that is your objective. And if you conduct analysis, you get the results. Your result will have implications, right? Because it will inform you who are most likely to have bigger intention to contribute to cash wakaf, right?
Yes.
So which means it will be important for badan wakaf, right? Because these are the people that are more likely to contribute to zakat. So basically, in order to raise cash wakaf, these are the people that you should focus on. How about those people who are less likely to contribute? Those people who are less likely to contribute, these are people that we should educate more, for example. We should not go and ask them to contribute because they are less likely to contribute. We'll waste our resources, but then we should educate more of the importance of wakaf. So that's implications, right?
Yes.
So you have to look at that part. I think you still will be able to contribute in terms of policy, because policy doesn't mean for the governments. It can be for the individuals in their financial planning, for example. It can be for the firms, their conduct of the business activities, right? It can be for investors. And for you, because you do on cash wakaf, it can be for badan wakaf, right? So in Malaysia we call lembaga, but in there maybe badan wakaf. But that basically the importance of your work, right? So you have to have that clarity in terms of these are my work and these are the importance of my work, right? Because I want to identify those who are more likely to have intention to contribute to cash wakaf and those are less. The strategies for badan wakaf would be different for these two different peoples, right? So I still see that to have implications, right? And the way for us to basically tell people how important our work, that would be very important. Okay, how to create novelty? Yeah, novelty from the gap research based on previous journal. That one, later we go on and we will discuss from time to time, right? In terms of how to find gap in research, for examples. And that's one really important part, right? I would try to look at in terms of finding gap in research when we go to introductions, right? So these are type of things that we are going to look at, right? Because now we have a hypothesis. Now we have to think of how this hypothesis fit in. What is the gaps, right? Of course, the best way to find gap, you have to read first, right? And try to look at what other people have done, right? What other people have done. So these are very important of finding gaps, right? Yes, should we read all related papers and then compare? The answer yes. We should read all related papers and compare with what people have done and what I try to do or what we try to do, right? So let's stop here because there are many questions coming up. We will open up, don't worry. Then we are going to go through one by one, right? So we have 71 proposals that has been submitted, right? So if you look at, if I spend 1 minute for each proposals, it will be 70 minutes. So quite long, right? So if I spend more than 1 minute, then it will give roughly 2 hours. It's too long, right? So, and that's why when I go through, right, just look at your proposals. Right? Just look at your proposal. I will give in passings only that something that you have to focus on in your write up later on, right? And then after that, I will stop, right? I will stop and then we can come back and you can ask with respect to your proposals. So that's what I will try to do, right? So I will not be long because I have 11 slides on the topics that you have submitted. And I think I put in here so that all of us know what other people are doing. And that one really important too, right? Now, because now we already form a groups, right? Once we form a group, get to know each other, right? Because later on, we may have to read each other articles, right? And provide feedbacks. We have to help each others, right? If someone in Islamic banking, maybe we want to ask someone in Islamic capital market to read, because if our writing is clear, it should not be a problem for someone in different area to read our articles, right? Even if they do not understand the technical part, they should be able to appreciate what you are doing, right? Because it should be clear to them, right? Because one of the professor from University of Groningen used to say that because he came to Malaysia and he provide basically the same thing, the guideline for writing, and he's in management. He said every article that he wrote, he get his wife to read. His wife is not academicians, right? So he get his wife to read. To the extent that at a certain point in time, his wife asked him, why you keep asking me to read? I'm not in academics. And his answer was simple. If you understand what I read, what I write, right, then my writing is acceptable, is good enough, right? So which means that you give someone else is not in your area, but that person can understand what you try to deliver, then your writing is clear enough, right? We don't need them to understand the technical detail, the econometrics or the statistic part, but you can convey your message. Your abstract, people understand what you try to say. Your introduction, people have some idea what you try to say. Even if those people who read your article is not in the same area, then your writing is good enough. So over time, we are going to help each others also, right? In fact, toward the end, we may, some of you may be requested to provide some comments, right, of other articles that have been written in these groups, right? So in that, helping each other in that like that should be developed in terms of building up our skill of writing, right? Get the feedback from our peers, right? So I will go through in quickly all those 71 topics that I have gone through, right? And I will raise a certain point that, in fact, most of the points I have mentioned, right? Do you think your hypothesis is enough or too much, right? Or do you need more focus in terms of trying to do the in terms of your research that you try to write, right? Or do you have enough data? Can you expand to some other countries, for example, right? So that when we go and try to look at some gap, by having more countries, is a lot easier to identify the gaps, as opposed just to do on one country, for example. Right? So these are type of things that I try to look at. So let me bring you through, right, the article. I hope you see. Some of them I put some notes, some of them I do not put notes, right? Because it's quite clear. But then most of them I do not put notes because I would like to basically go through with you here, right, one by one, right? Article number 1. Now, I put the name here, right? Please remember your article number, because when you ask me back, you can remember your article number so that I can refer back to what your proposals, right? Now, as I mentioned before, in terms of this case, for example, you have so many aspects that you want to look at, right? My suggestion very simple. Why not you focus something that are most important, that people are most interested right now when it comes to peer-to-peer lending. What are most critical, right? Peer-to-peer lending. Borrower's characteristics most critical, or the loan characteristic most critical? The macroeconomic condition most critical right now, right? In order to look at peer-to-peer lending. So you focus on those. Doesn't mean you have to forget all other three. This one become your controls aspects, right? Control factors, but you focus only on one, and that would be my suggestions, right? Now, for the second one, your hypothesis, you try to look at macro conditions, suku, and energy, right? The problem that I have with this hypothesis would be, right, how are these three connected, affecting twin deficits? Because it seems there are three different topics in one article, right? The impact of macro conditions on twin deficits, the impact of sukuk in twin deficits, the impact of energy in twin deficits, right? So I'm not sure how they are connected. You have to really look back, right? And when you look at, for example, energy sector and sukuk, particularly, what are the typical foundations? And what are the hypotheses? Right? Are there any expected relation between them? Right? So those are type of things that you have to ask yourself. The third one, green sukuk, good things, environmental risk, and you use secondary data. Right? Now, how you measure the data, and that one really important too. You have to look at how you measure the data, and what is enough to look at only one country. So that's what you have to look at. Right? So measurements here were very important. If you have measurement, it's okay. Right? And number 4 up until number 7, this is one that I mentioned. These are clear objectives because you want to look at performance. And COVID-19 and stock market performance are hot topic right now. Many articles have been written, many articles have been published for many different countries. Right? But your focus here on the Indonesian stock indices. You look at Islamic equity market Indonesia, again in Indonesia and here in Indonesia, 4 of them, a clear objective because you just want to look at the behavior, the performance of the stock market during COVID-19, but then whether the scope sufficient. I try to look at it. Right? Here you look at conventional Syariah and SRI, for example. You look at individual stocks or you are looking at the index. If you look at the index, there are only 3. Is that enough, for example? So those are type of things. You can remember, it may be enough for some journal, but it may not be enough for very good journals. Right? So those are type of things you have to look at. It's no problem to focus on this, right? On this, but then just put some thoughts. Whether you expand in terms of your scopes, right? And not only looking at Indonesia, but look at some other countries. But of course, when you try to expand some other countries, how about the data that you have, right? Or even for Indonesia, how long the data that you have for you to be able to look at the context of the behavior of the indices. Right? So these are type of things that basically you have to look at in this one, right? And here, millennials, interest of millennial investors to invest. Can hypothesis be developed? I think it can, because you try to look at same thing as what has been asked before. Intention to do cash wakaf, intention to invest in Islamic capital market. You can look at the characteristic of millennial investors, right? And you have here COVID-19 pandemics, right? So very specific context. And policy evaluations. What do you mean by policy evaluations? Right? Is there any exact hypothesis, right? In terms of the spin-off, are you looking at performance and so on? Would data be sufficient? Because how many cases of spin-off? Would this one be case study or you have data analysis? Right? You use secondary data here, right? And the same thing here, you put effectivity, right? I'm not sure what that means, but you have to look at carefully. You'll be more focused in terms of your hypothesis here, effectivities, right? Now, the same thing here, optimizing financial portfolio, right? You have 2 parts of the hypothesis, one to come up with the optimal financial portfolio, and one look at the impact of this optimal financial portfolio to financial stability. Okay? So I'm not sure in terms of this case, right? In terms of how you do it, but then the hypothesis can be refined further because you have two parts of the hypothesis, right? Why not you look at the relation between financial portfolio and financial stability? And from that one, you try to decide what are the good mix, which means that the optimal portfolio is the outcome of your analysis, right? Not that you try to decide the optimal first, right? Because I'm afraid that you try to decide the optimal financial portfolio, but at the end, this optimal financial portfolio doesn't result in financial stability, right? So more important, I would say more interesting to look at, right? A portfolio, financial portfolio diversifications and financial stability of Islamic Bank, right? Now, if you look at here, is it enough to look at, right? Is it enough to look at Islamic Bank in Indonesia? Do you have enough, right, data point? So those are type of things that we have to look at, right? And board characteristic and political connectedness of Islamic Bank, right? Empirical evidence. And now this one very interesting topics, right? Because you look at board and political connectedness. But the only thing that I would like to ask here, are you looking at the impact of board characteristic and political connectedness on the performance of Indonesian and Malaysian Islamic Bank, right? If you want to do that, and that would, I would say, you have to have very good article because political connectedness and board characteristic are the area that people are looking at. But if you want to just describe the board characteristics and political connectedness of Islamic Bank, right? That one become only descriptions. So which means that what are your hypotheses here that you try to look at, right? So those are type of things that you need to answer for these parts, right? So I'm looking at Islamic banking here, right? Now here again the same thing. COVID-19 pandemic, how it affects Islamic and conventional bank in Indonesia. Good article because people are interested in looking at COVID-19, but will the data be sufficient to have only few Islamic bank to look at, right? And conventional bank? Will data be sufficient? This is one very important part. It may be because you have both conventional and Islamic bank. But if you focus on more countries, right? Because data on COVID-19 are available, right? Freely. You can download data case by case, the death rate and so on. Why not do for some other countries, for example, right? So these are type of things, right? But then you have to look at whether you can get the data or not, right? Corporate ethical identity. Now, how you measure this? And that's the only thing that they have here, right? The coverage on Kismet +3 is good, right? Because you have 9 countries that you look at. Earning quality is something that people are looking at, but how you measure ethical identity here. So only measurement part for this one, right? Effect of ethical behavior in marketing, the satisfaction of Syariah bank customers, right? Now, measurements again on ethical behavior in marketing, because you try to look at how the ethical behavior in marketing affects satisfactions of the customers of Syariah banks. So you have hypothesis. The same thing, intention to deposit in Islamic bank. How you measure religiosity, of course, profitability is characteristic of the bank, but how you measure religiosity, right? In terms of affecting the intention to deposits. Technological diffusions in Islamic banking, a case of electronic banking services in Indonesia. I put in here because these are very important topic to look at, but then I think you have to build up the hypothesis, not just looking at technology diffusions, but look at how this might affect, for example, performance of banks in Indonesia. Not only maybe Islamic bank, but maybe also conventional bank, if the data is not sufficient. Right? Islamic banking financing in Indonesia, right? This one I would say would be sufficient because you look at cross provinces analysis, right? You do regional studies, right? You do regional studies. So this is good because there are a lot of work that has been done on regional studies, right? So I don't have any problem with this one. You try to look at Islamic banking financing in Indonesia, but what focus of Islamic banking financing that you try to look at, right? Determinants, or you want to look at pro-cyclicality, for example, right? In terms of using cross-provinces data, right? You have Sharia and conventional resilience, performance, and innovations. Again, the same thing, right? You have to look at measurements. I think when you write this article, this title, remind me of the Beck et al. Articles in 2003. More or less the same structure, but you put in a good way. You're not only looking at performance resilience, but also you look at innovations. These are the part that you may have added, right, into your work. So these are also good topic to look at during the COVID-19, right? 19 pandemic. So would say if you can measure innovation well, apart from resilience, performance, and you add in COVID-19, I would say this one will come up with good articles. Right? And I also do not have problem for this one, credit risk and SME in Indonesian Islamic Bank, right, versus conventional bank. Right? Because when it comes to SME, it's very interesting to look at in more details, right? And how the SME affect the credit risk of Islamic bank versus conventional bank. Right? So I just go through quickly like this, and later on I will try to open up for discussions. Right? This one's right. Working capital financings and investments by Syariah banking, right? To MSME, right? So I'm not sure. These are your independent variables, working capital financing. This is also your independent variable. And necessarily mean you want to answer in terms of certain objective. How these two affects certain performance criteria of Syariah banks, and that's what I understand from my reading. Right? But it have to be made clear in terms of what you try to do here. Right? Factors influence non-Muslim in taking home ownerships. Right? These are primary data analysis. There's clear cut. You try to look at factors, and then I think hopefully in introductions you are going to put in what are factors, right? And this one's hopefully you can put in English, right? Statistics and tata kelola bank terhadap laju pengembalian investasi. So this one also you look at the impacts, right, of the characteristic of and tata kelola banks. I'm not sure what it means by tata pengembalian investasi. Returns, right? But then you use BPRS. Now remember BPRS. International readers will not know what that means, right? So basically, if you want to publish in Indonesia, then it's okay, right? But the hypothesis is clear between these two, right? But then whether you have data sufficient or not, that's something that you have to look at, right? And proyeksi stabilitas jangka pendek dan jangka panjang perbankan syariah. Right, menggunakan pendekatan panel ARDLs. Right? You have panel ARDLs, you have banking Syariah, and you have COVID-19. Right? Now, I'm not sure in terms of COVID-19 will provide you enough data or not for you to be able to run ARDL. Right? Because you look at stabilitas jangka pendek and jangka panjang. So I'm not sure. This again, the data that you have, right? So we will have to look at, and we will discuss in terms of these parts, right? And Islamic credit risk performance for home financings, right? I think it's good before and during COVID-19. Intellectual capital efficiency to the business and social performance of Syariah bank. Again, the hypothesis must be clear and measurement must be there, right? the effect of improving the quality of human resources and profitability on company value with good governance as moderating variables. Of course, title have to be refined further, but then I understand that these are the moderating factor and how the quality of human resources and profitability affecting the company value. So you have that hypothesis, but again, the data that you have to look at. Right? So these are all of the things that I go through, which basically highlight what I have mentioned before in terms of data point. For example, Syariah bank and conventional bank during COVID-19. The second article that tried to look at Syariah bank and conventional bank during COVID-19. Again, data point. Right? Supervisory committee, Syariah supervisory boards and financial performance, does the tenure matter? Again, whether data is sufficient or not, because you look at only Islamic bank, right? And then analysis of influencing factors, collections of Mudarabah deposits. Again, you look at Syariah banks, whether data is sufficient or not, right? So all of the articles that you have here, in fact, transmissions, right? Financial digitalizations and so on, right? All of these things, right, have concern on data, whether they are available or not, and whether whether data are sufficient or not for you to conduct analysis. For example, for this one, look at Indonesia, for example, you have conventional and monetary policies. Yes, when you look at conventional data may be available, but if you do for more countries, right, can you get more deeper into your analysis? So that's something that I have mentioned before. I would like you to look at, right? Financial digitalization models, right? What this means, for example, what the growth inclusivity means, what our economic equality means. So, which means you have to refine your hypothesis there, right? And the same thing, what are exactly the hypotheses that you try to look at? And I put this one again because these are the current topic, like cryptocurrencies, stable coins, and so on, and other payments innovations. Very important parts. You want to look at opportunities, you want to look at risk. Are there any data analysis that you would like to do here? A very important point, right? So if you can come up with some data analysis, not just merely analyzing from certain perspective, but look at data, then it will be good, right? And this one try to look at the impact of inflations and exports in the national economy, right? Again, you look at Indonesia, why inflations, why export? So these are type of things that you have to look at. You have basically a clear hypothesis here in the context of what you try to do for these parts, right? And you look at very interesting stabilitas system Keuangan, right? And what are determinants? It's good article. There are few articles coming up for many other countries. And in fact, there are new articles coming up whether financial inclusions affect financial stability. But they do multi-countries, right? So that's why always you have to ask yourself, if I do on Indonesia, what are new things that I can add? People have done on many countries, right? So these are type of things that you have to ask, right? Economic financial literacy, this one primary data set, you try to look at the impact on investments, Syariah decisions, right? And this one, again, very interesting on electronic money and how it related to monetary policies, very important. Will there be data analysis also here? So that one we want to put in, right? And here the one that I mentioned that are closely related to what I'm doing right now, Islamic financial developments and income inequality in Indonesia. Why only Indonesia? Why not in many other countries? For example, something that you have to think, right? The nexus between Islamic financial inclusions and economic growth in OIC countries, okay, by Sulaiman, right? And there are few articles that have done on this. Right? What are the differences that you would like to introduce when you try to do more or less the same topic? And that's why literature review is very important. right? But these are good topics, right, I would say, right? So all these 39 topics are mostly secondary data set because they fall under Islamic capital market, Islamic banking, or I call it as monetary or financial economics, right? And the rest is on wakaf, on zakat, is more of primary, right? When it comes to primary, I cannot tell much because you are going to collect data. So you are going to have data, right? But your data must allow you to basically, right, test certain hypotheses. And that's the only thing that I have in the context of primary data. Try to come up with certain hypotheses, right? For example, determinants, pengembangan wakaf wang, dan implikasi, right? Even if you have primary data from that ones, can you get the data that allow you to test certain hypotheses? What are the determinants, right, for the developments of cash wakaf, right? From that data, can you test that hypothesis? So those are some type of thing that you have to look at. So I have the same basically comments that I would like to make with respect to those who use primary data. Can you come up with certain hypotheses? Of course, you don't need to use econometric. Some of you, I observe you are going to use structural equation modeling, a way of testing hypothesis. And some of you may want to just compare, for example, the means, also testing the hypothesis, right? And of course, I encourage this type of research because these are new, right? People are becoming more and more interested in zakat, wakaf, and takaful, and that's why I put them. I think we looked at many articles in this area of takaful, wakaf, and zakat, and because these are new, and I think when something is new, you don't have to have something full blown of data, and you can come up with preliminary data set from your primary data collection and so on, and try to test certain hypothesis. But you have to look at your hypothesis, right? So all these primary that I have, in fact, related to your hypothesis, right? Here is more of wakaf together with Islamic banking, right? Determinants of financial practices in Islamic, a case study of wakaf contracts, right? Quite interesting. You look at wakaf contract, and then you look at determinants and so on, right? So I would like to look at, come up with certain hypotheses, right? And all of these things, as I mentioned here, financial technology improve Muslim participation. You already have hypothesis because you already have research questions here, right? And then this research try to look at factors that influence consumers in using e-zakat. Again, you have hypothesis in there. Right? So try to develop more specific hypothesis from the primary data collection that you have there, right? Here, determinants of zakat institution readiness, for example, right? So which means you have hypothesis, you try to analyze them, whether they are ready or not, right? So these are articles under the zakat wakaf, right? And then I have the last group article here, the one that are more of other articles, Islamic wealth management, for example, terhadap pemberdayaan perempuan, for example, empowerment, women empowerment here, right? So basically, you try to look at the impact of this on women empowerment, right? So you have hypothesis, right? And make it clear in the context of hypothesis. All primary data, I think you have hypothesis, so I cannot question your primary data here, right? Because you look at, you have saving investment behavior, you have Hajj pilgrimage, but you have to make it clear exactly what are your hypotheses that can be measured, right? Measured mean you can come up with statistics later on, and then you can run the test, right? Here, secondary data, Tawheed is accounting behavior, measurements, right? Measurement problems, right? Can you measure them? Tawheed based accounting behavior. Age and happiness, clear cut. You try to look whether age of a person affect happiness, but you have moderating factor, expenditure and education, right? So these are also good other type of article that we try to look at, clear cut in terms of hypothesis, right? So I'm not going to go to theories yet, just stating that, yes, you have hypothesis that you try to look at, but we have to make clear, because my general observation that I have here, the hypothesis is not clear cut the way that you state them. As a result, you have to make it so clear that you want to look at the impact of X on Y. What are those X? What are the Y that you try to focus on? Right? Make it to be that specifics, right? Because we are targeting writing articles, right? And in fact, you can write determinants of such and such. But my preference, right, if you ask me, for example, determinant is too big, right, too broad. Imagine an article that try to look at determinants, so you have to come up with borrowers determinants, loan determinants, institutional investor determinants, macroeconomic determinants, too many. Why not you focus on specific objective? And these are the spirit of writing journal article. Normally journal article, if you look at, they have that 90% of journal article, empirical work, they have very specific on what they try to look at. Of course, there are few articles that have determinants of such and such, right? But not many articles like that, because you have to be really extensive, right, for looking at all various type of determinants, right? So those are type of things that you have to think when it comes to your hypothesis and so on, right? So again, I think more or less the same thing that I would like to raise, right? Fostering export for halal food and Muslim fashions. You must have a hypothesis, right? Which again, in terms of this case, you try to look at determinants, right? Here again, determinants, social media influencer, how this affect determinants in terms of how this affect intentions for halal cosmetic purchases, right? So you have to look in that context, right? Try to come up very clear-cut hypothesis based on what you have done, right? Again, here determinants variables, right? That related to tourism in ASEAN 5, right? Why just determine? Why open up for the whole thing? Why not focus on one specific areas that people are so interested in right now, right? Of course, tourism is important for ASEAN 5, but then what are the specific things that people try to look at in affecting tourism, for example, right? So these are type of things that people look at in the context of the writing and empirical work. People want to see a specific hypothesis, right? So more or less the same thing for all other articles that I would like to mention here, right? You must come up with your specific hypothesis that you want to test at the end. You have all your objective, right? I would like you to forget everything that have been written before, and not the content, but everything on how you have written before, because now we would like to focus on with the hypothesis that I have here, right? The hypothesis that I have here. How should I gather information and then write my articles, right? Now, I will not be able to give, as I mentioned to you, to give in more details, right? But from what I know, right, we are going to have WhatsApp groups, right? And we are going to have email groups, right? And in terms of the specific for each one of you, we are going to communicate throughout the WhatsApp groups, right? In terms of the feedback, more specific to your topics, right? More specific to your topic. We are going to go through the WhatsApp group or the email group. I expect during the early periods, early stage here, there will be a lot of discussions. It's okay. We can discuss, we can go through and so on, right, in terms of what you have here. But remember your paper number. I will send this slide to you after the workshops, because in future communications, you have your number. And if you want to change your topic or your hypothesis, please inform us so that we can put in, and then later on we can bring you through based on your new proposed topic or your new proposed hypothesis, right? Because these are what we would like to have in terms of bringing up, in terms of writing our articles, okay? So these are the conclusion of my second part, right? And I will open up for a few minutes, 10 or 20 minutes for you to ask. Right? Do you have anything with respect to what I have mentioned here?
Oh, thank you very much, Professor. Let me read some questions. We prioritize from the panelists. First, from Fetria, I'm interested in researching Islamic banking. How do we introduce a completely new variable in our article? For example, about the variable hijrah intention, where the variable has never been used before. That's the question, Professor.
Hijrah intentions.
Yeah.
What that exactly means, right?
I don't know. She asked that how do we introduce a completely new variable in our?
Yeah, I know. But
she can explain more about the hijrah intention.
Hijrah intentions. The meaning of hijrah intentions. I just want to understand that part.
Mrs. Fitria, are you here? Would you like to explain more about the hijrah intention variable?
Yes.
Please, shortly.
Okay. I mean, hijrah intention is like a general intention, but it's come from a deep of a Muslim. It's intention based on kemauan ya, want to principle Islamic application. So hijrah intention terdiri dari three dimension, is about a plan, desire, and effort to untuk melakukan prinsip-prinsip Islam untuk melakukan prinsip-prinsip Islam ke dalam sehingga itu mendorong intentionnya untuk berpindah dari sesuatu yang dianggap buruk ke sesuatu yang dianggap baik menurut agama Islam. Itu hijrah intention.
Yeah, I know, but then do you have measurements of that?
What, pardon me?
Can you measure that hijrah intentions?
Pengukurannya enggak?
Gimana?
Ada parameter pengukur.
Ya.
Iya, parameter pengukurnya itu terdiri dari 3 dimensi, yaitu ada desire, jadi ada hasrat atau keinginan yang kuat untuk berpindah atau meninggalkan sesuatu yang dianggap buruk oleh agama Islam menuju ke sesuatu yang dihalalkan. Kemudian ada effort atau usaha untuk melaksanakan desire tadi, terus kemudian yang terakhir ada rencana untuk melaksanakan keinginan tadi.
And then you want to look, you want to look at the impact of this on bank performance, Islamic bank performance.
Yes.
Okay.
Jadi saya ingin melihat bahwa saya sebelumnya ada gap riset dari pengaruh religiusitas terhadap keinginan orang untuk, terutama di Indonesia ya, untuk mengadopsi perbankan syariah. Kenyataannya bahwa tidak semua Muslim itu mau mengadopsi perbankan syariah, walaupun kalau di Indonesia itu sudah ada fatwa MUI yang mengatakan bahwa bunga bank itu adalah riba. Nah, sehingga dari gap riset bahwa pengaruh religiusitas itu ada yang berpengaruh dan tidak berpengaruh, itu memunculkan, menurut saya memunculkan variabel baru yang itu bisa menjembataninya, yaitu hijrah intention. Jadi kemauan seseorang atau minat seseorang yang kuat, dalam hal ini hijrah intention tadi itu sangat berpengaruh ke dia untuk benar-benar mau berpindah dari bank konvensional ke bank syariah. Jadi bukan hanya sekedar religiusitas saja yang berpengaruh, tapi itu religiusitas tidak cukup kuat untuk mempengaruhi mereka untuk berpindah dari konvensional ke bank syariah.
Okay, just one more thing. When you say bank performance, right? Are you in your proposal, for example, or what you are thinking? How you measure bank performance, or what type of data that you use by banks or by aggregate data or aggregate data?
Excuse me? Pardon me?
No, when ukur untuk apa ni bank performance.
Oh, variabel pengukuran bank performance.
Ya.
Indikator untuk bank performance-nya sendiri itu kalau saya hubungkan dengan hijrah intention tadi adalah bisa loyalitas ataupun satisfaction terhadap perbankan syariah.
Okay, now your work will be primary data, right?
Yeah.
So primary data. So when you see, I'm not sure how to link because I'm not so good in primary data type of research, for examples, right? But I would say that let's say you have performance, you said satisfactions. So you have satisfactions as your performance measurements, right? Customer satisfactions, right?
Yes.
And then you have intentions, hijrah intentions, right? You have
Yes.
hijrah intentions. So basically, you try to look at whether someone who have the hijrah intentions will be more satisfied with banks or not. Yeah.
Yes, and also more loyalty to Islamic bank.
See, the difficulty with this type of work, I would say, right? You just look at if, for examples, right? If, for example, I have basically intentions to move into Islamic bank, right?
Yes.
To move into Islamic bank for religious reasons, for example.
Yes.
Right. So what that tell me regarding my satisfactions with Islamic bank?
Excuse me?
Because I try to look at your hypothesis here, right? Your hypothesis here, because in studies that try to connect basically religiosity, for example, right?
Yes.
Religiosity to performance, for example, bank. There are many studies that try to look at how religiosities affect bank risk, for example, but they use secondary data set, both in terms of religiosity as well as risk of the bank, right? So they use basically secondary data set, but I'm not sure how to make connection between these two, right?
Yes.
I would like to use Islamic bank, but then I try to measure what is the impact of my intention to use Islamic bank with my satisfaction with Islamic bank. So it's quite confusing there for me in order to understand this, right? But then if, for example, you would like to look at the level of religiosity of the customers, for example, and how this affect the risk of Islamic bank, that one is basically good, right? because one study has been done I give you one study that has been done for Pakistan, and this study you can search, right? Published in Pacific Economic Review, right? I forgot the title, but you can search in Pacific Economic Review, right?
Yeah.
They look at, right? They look at basically the risk, right? Including withdrawal risk. Withdrawal risk. One part of the risk that they look at, withdrawal risk, right? Whether people come to the banks and withdraw money or not during the time of crisis, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right, during time of crisis. So they look more at deposits behavior of the bank, and some study that has been proposed try to look at deposit behavior. Some study that try to look at financing behavior, right?
Okay.
So you can look at also financings of Islamic bank, but let me mention of what has been done here, right? Now, when they find this basically withdrawal risk of Islamic bank as compared to conventional bank, and they find out that Islamic bank does not face withdrawal risk, right? Does not face withdrawal risk, right? Which means that even during the time of crisis, there's not significant drop in deposit in Islamic bank. As opposed to conventional bank, there exists significant drop in deposit in conventional bank during crisis. So what they try to do here, why this thing happens, right? Why this thing happened, right? They go back to the survey data. And when they go back to survey data, they found out that Muslim depositors, right, they will keep supporting Islamic bank regardless of the situations because of religiosity, right? As a result, Islamic bank doesn't face withdrawal deposits, and as a result, Islamic banks are able to conduct their normal business even during the time of crisis. But they use this survey data religiosity as supporting, as the reasons why withdrawal risk in Islamic banks not there, right? So these are related to religiosity, but they look in different ways. Like very innovative way, they combine both of them together. They take the survey result, and then they do a nice secondary study, and then make connection between those two, right? Those two. But if you want to look at the person that want to go to Islamic bank and try to look at how they are satisfied Islamic bank, they only have intention to go, but how do we evaluate their satisfaction? So I see that disconnection in terms of that hypothesis, right?
Okay.
So that my evaluation based on the limited question that you have asked. But there are a lot of articles that try to look at the impact. For example, you can take a look at articles that look at the impact of culture, the impact of religiosity, right? Religiosity, right?
Yes.
And how these things affects basically the bank performance. There are a lot of work that has been done. And they use secondary data. The only thing that you may have to improve may be how they measure this, because in most studies that have done this, for example, they have certain measurements. You may want to improve on measurements. For example, you want to focus more on Islamic religiosity, for example. Right?
Okay.
So those are the type of things that I would like to suggest. Okay. Any others?
Okay, thank you.
Right. Yes, another one, Professor. Mrs. Ramawati, she asked that her research is about accountability on wakaf transactions in Baitul Mal wa Tamwil institutions, or BMTI. The number of BMTI increases significantly, but the data is very limited. So how to convince in the paper that the study is essential, even though regardless the limitation of data?
Because if you base on data, right, And if your data is limited, you cannot do a lot of things, right? Because if data is not, because the problem would be, I try to find exactly the questions I cannot find here.
In the chat box. It's actually a long question. I already summarized it.
Yeah, in the chats or in the Q&A?
In the chat previously.
Okay.
From
Okay, let me.
How to convince how to convince the study how to convince the reader that the study is essential.
Okay. My research is about accountability on wakaf transaction in Baitul Mal. BMTI is known as Islamic microfinance institutions. Right? In number of BMTI was more than 3,000 and 3,000, right? They put there, and 5,000. The number for BTI Islamic increased significantly. Right? Since the number of BMTI increased, since the annual report is not published to public by, which means data is limited, I faced challenges in obtaining data, but I got annual reports of BMT, even though a few, how to convince in the paper that the study is essentials. Right? Now, even if the study the essentials, of course, right, you can convince. But then, will data can provide convincing result or not by limited number of data that you have? Right? So that the answer that you have to ask, right? Because there are a lot of good studies, a lot of studies that are important, but then because there are not enough data, people cannot do that study, right? Why? Because why we do a study when data is so limited that even the result that we get, basically are not robust or are not convincing, as far as we do data analysis. But if, for example, you think that BMT cases are so important, you may have to adopt different type of techniques, right? Different type of techniques. Basically, what I try to say here, maybe you have to do a case study analysis, for example, because some journal, they accept case study, right? But then I do not know case study on how to write them and so on. But some journal does accept case study, right? You think very important that you want to address and you want to highlight, and from the experience of BMT, some learning, some knowledge can be gained by looking at them, right? You can take a look at, but that different type of writing, which I'm not able to provide you guideline in this workshop. But for quantitative data, data must be sufficient. Right? How to create a novelty from the gap research based on previous journal. Now, if you look at previous work that has been done, for examples, when you read previous journals, what you need to answer based on the article that are similar to yours that you have done. Right? For example, you are writing on financial developments and income inequality. Right? One proposal on financial development and income equality. There are many articles that has been done. You need to highlight what are the differentiating aspects of your articles, right? And why that difference are important that can add to our understanding. Okay? I give you a very simple example. Right? Let's say in the 10 articles that you have read, right, that have been published in the past 5 years, for example, right, focus mostly on, let's say, developed countries or individual countries. Now you want to focus on, let's say, countries that have Islamic banking, right? So your difference is country with Islamic banking. Now, that difference that you have with some other article, you have to answer, why is it important to focus specifically on these countries that have Islamic banking? Right? And if you are able to answer that, you can answer the gap, because that gap means that you try to add new things by looking from different perspective, or by looking from countries that have Islamic banking, where, for example, you can argue theoretically there. So which means that you have to find certain point, few points that make your article to be different, right? Not just, let's say, okay, people have done this thing on China, a big countries. I would like to do this thing on Indonesia, the other big countries. But then you are not able to answer why Indonesia deserves attention on its own, right? You have to, maybe because Indonesia have certain policy that are different, and you would like to look at whether that policy that are different from many others, for example, will add more insight, will add more understanding into the impact of financial developments on income inequality, right? So there must be something unique that you would like to add there, right? So which means that you have to look at your objective, how different you are from few articles in the past 5 years that have been done on the same topics, right? And then once you find a difference, why this difference important? And that can answer the gap, right? So that's the way that I would look at in terms of trying to find the gap. We are going to look more in terms of those things as we go along and writing our introductions, okay? I'm interested, this one I have answered in terms of hijrah intentions, right? How can we get answer from journal assessors quickly? What can be done? Okay, this one basically we'll answer after we submit to the journals, right? We'll try to look at, because once we submit at the end stage, right? There are two things, right? Basically, how long we should wait, for example. Some journal, they will try to provide feedback quickly. Some journal maybe take too long time. And according to my colleagues that have presented on Friday, they said if journal take extremely too long time, you send to the wrong journal, because that may not be a good journal. Right? Because a good journal, they try to provide you the answer quickly. Right? But then quickly doesn't mean in 1 week. It may be 1 month or 2 months. Right? But more important, once we get the feedback, how to address those feedbacks. And that one more important. So that one will be, I will provide tips and later on, right? Now, it's not quick, because you have to remember, right? You have to remember, right? In our workshops, right? Once you submit on times, I will try to commit myself to give you feedback quickly in the next workshops, right? And that commitment, right? But you have to remember, journal also have that commitments, but then not within 1 week or 2 weeks, but within 1 month, 2 months. But also you have to remember that those people that read your article and assess your article, they are not get paid. They provide free academic services. So that's why sometimes we have to provide them sometimes. And sometimes means maybe up until the maximum 3 months. And if you cannot get anything 3 months, then we can start communicating with the editor, right? In a nice way, because we cannot be provocative, we cannot be blaming, right? In a nice way. So those are type of things that we have to learn once we get the article later on, right? There, in terms of submissions, where to submit, and how to do when we get feedback, how long we have to wait, and so on, will be later on, right? And okay.
It's already 20
Okay.
minutes.
Yeah.
If you want to proceed.
Yeah, 20 minutes. We will try to look at, and then we chat further. For example, Now, qualitative research is not my area, so I cannot do anything, right? Quantitative research my area, right? So those are the one that I can give you, right? I can give you some. Okay, the Islamic banking finance, Indonesia is rigid, not flexible, and so those are things that I cannot answer because it's not part of what we discuss in terms of research topic and so on. And I think Chitra had mentioned there are many articles. Thank to all of you. I think Chitra, maybe later on you can collect this question and answer and input in one page. So maybe you can send to me, and then I will try to answer, right? And then I can send to you back and distribute it to participants. Okay.
For sure.
Because there are so many in here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we go to the next one. Now, the next one, as I said, my expectations would be we have to work hard and then we have to commit and meet the deadline, right? So the next step that I would like to do, I know you have written introductions in your proposals, and some of you that have given me the thesis, for example, you have written the introductions, right? And I give you feedback in terms of your topic, try to focus and try to go deeper into one specific objective. Do not try to have so many hypotheses in your work and so on. That my advice to you and so on, right? So the next step would be the writing introductions, right? We have to write introductions, right? Now, I do not want you to go back and immediately write introductions, right? I would like you to spend 1 week or 2 weeks gathering information first, doing some homework first, right, related to your topic before you write your introductions, right? I will give a form to you, right, to fill in before you write introductions. Once you fill all those forms, for examples, right, then from those forms, try to arrange whatever point you put in those forms and write 2 to 3 pages introductions. I will give you only up to maximum 3 pages. Now, remember the introduction that you are going to write will not be final one, right? Because we may come back and rewrite them. But at least it will provide us a way of writing and how to look at the flow and how to make sure that, or how to write so that the flow is neat and is good, right? And then how to put elements that are needed introductions in our introductions. And so that's something that I will try to guide you here, right? So what I would like you to do here in terms of this case, right? Before you have your objective, right? Now, once you have your objective, always, once you have your research objective, the next steps, always reading, right? Always researching and reading. You have to do some research. You have to go out, right? Of course, you have written, you have done some research. You can take the point that you get there. But I would like you to get certain point from what you have written and do more work in terms of try to get this, right? With respect to your topics, any discussion that has been made in practices, right? In the industry, for example, in the policy circles, are there any discussion that has been made, right, with respect to your topics, right? So you have to search through, right? How much discussion that has been made, right? With respect to your topics, are there theoretical foundations, right? Are there theoretical foundations that try to link what you try to look at, right? So you have hypothesis. Where that hypothesis come from? Do you have theoretical foundations, right? Now, theoretical foundation doesn't mean that you have to derive mathematical models. Just try to look at the explanation that people make, right, in predicting the relationship between the variable. Why they predict the way they predict, right? So that's what you have to do. I will give you an example later on, right? And then the third one read articles that are related to your work. Okay? If you do on, let's say, COVID-19 and stock market performance, read those articles. If you do something on financial inclusions or financial development and inequality, read those articles. If you are writing on credit risk and SMEs financing, read those articles. Right? Try to search those articles. Right? Now, I know that some of you may not get access to the articles, but you can search. Once you search, get the topics, get the journals. If your institution cannot provide to the journals, contact us in terms of in our group or to our committee. Right? We try to help you and try to search the article for you. Right? So, but then you have to search for the article, try to read. Right? In good journal, articles that have been written in good journal. So these are a lot of hard work that you have to do. Are there any relevant statistics? Are there any figures? Right? You try to look at poverty. You have, do you have statistics on poverty? Right? You try to look at, for example, readiness, right? Fintech readiness, digital readiness of Amel Zakat. Do you have statistics? Right? How many of them are IT savvy, for example? Right? So those are type of things that you have to look at. Now, you have to look at, you have to put some thoughts. If I do this topic, what are my contributions? Okay? What I try to contribute, what are the gaps that I try to contribute from what I have done? And you cannot answer this one unless you read existing articles. Right? Because contribution means that you try to do a little bit different from the article that you have done. Right? The article that you have read. So that's what you have to do. Right? And then try to look at the subjects, right, of the study and the sample. Right? And most of you, your study is Islamic banking or banks in Indonesia. Why you want to focus on Indonesia? Is there any specific reasons that make Indonesia interesting? This just try to highlight the fact that it can provide you the idea of identifying the gaps. Right? You look at OIC, why OIC countries? You look at Kismut, why Kismut countries? You look at provinces, why provinces, for example. So those are things that you have to answer. Okay? It's not something easy. Right? It's not something easy. Right? And in fact, yesterday, basically, I had Zoom meeting with one of Indonesian researcher. We are in close connections. And now he spent his time in the US for Fulbright fellowships in US for 3 months, right? And he went to one of the university, right? So I asked him why he didn't go to the other university and work with the other persons, right? And he said, the other person said that you can come and work with me as long as you are willing to work 18 hours per day to do research, right? So, and that person come from very good university. You look at, to be good, hard works, right? So now you have to spend your time doing a lot of hard work, reading journal articles, because these are the training that you might have. Reading is never bad investments, right? Believe me, right? Now you read article. Later on, I will teach you how you read and how you learn the way people writing, so that you can adopt their way of writing. Okay? Because sometimes when you read article, you love the way that they write. You can basically follow or copy their style of writing and train yourself to write in that way. So that's something that's very important. But then start with reading. Right? So these are type of things that you must have, right? And then once you have all these things, put them in the flow. These are the flow that I have. I will give you the guideline for writing for you to go through, because I have gone through in details last year, right, in terms of how to write introductions, which basically we emphasize first the statement of topic of study, and then we emphasize the academic and practical importance, and we summarize a little bit of literature, and when we highlight the gap, the controversies, inconsistencies, and that's why we try to come in and state our research objective. And so these are more or less what we put in our introductions. Okay? So, but then I would like you to figure out how to structure the information that you get for your introductions. Now, let me demonstrate, right? One of topics, right? Let me demonstrate one of the topics. Let me demonstrate one of the topics, right? Through the forms, right? So this is the form that I'm going to give you, right? This is the form that I'm going to give. I hope you see this form, right? I will give you these forms, right? Where basically I will ask you, right, in terms of what is your research objective, right? For example, what you need to do, right? What you need to do, right? Basically, let's say my research objective, right? To evaluate, for example, right? Evaluate. You have to go and do the nexus between, right? Between, right? Financial inclusions, right? And economic growth. Right? Economic growth. Right? So let's say these are my topics. Now, then I looked at, is the objective discussed, debated within the professional and policy circles, right? What I have to do is very simple. I just need to go to website, Google, and search. Are there any discussion that has been made? Right? Are there any discussion that has been made with respect to this? Right? Yes, there are discussions. Many, for example, many multilateral institutions. Right? I can put in many multilateral institutions. What are multilateral institutions? World Bank, right? IMF, even Islamic Development Bank, for example. Right? Many others say that, right? Financial inclusions, right, is an enabler, right, of SDG, right? SDG. Which part of SDG is, of course, economic growth as well as income inequality. People discuss about financial inclusion, right? So, and in fact, right, I can put in also countries, many countries, right? Many countries, right, have adopted financial inclusions, right, as basically have adopted financial inclusion as policy agenda, right? And I can cite articles. What article that have said this? For example, many countries, right, that have adopted this. I can cite some articles. So these are type of thing that you have to look at, whether something that has been done, whether people have discussed them. Why? You need this information to motivate your work, right? To motivate, these are important. People are discussing this, right? But then we do not know exactly what are the answers, but people discuss. People say this, someone say that, someone say this, for example, right? And then you may get some article, right? People may say financial inclusions is not a cure for all problems, right? And this one, which means create debates, right? So that's why you have to go and try to read a lot, right? Being an academic, you have to remember, you cannot just read general article. We have to read professional article. We have to read economists. We have to read Wall Street Journal, because these are type of things that we have to go through and try to look at what are type of things that people have discussed. Okay, and then try to look at, are there relevant statistics, right? We can take a look at statistics on financial inclusions. Right? What is the statistic on this for developed countries? Right? For developing countries, for example. So the emphasis on financial inclusion. And then for, let's say, OIC, any relevant statistics, for example, right? Maybe you can take statistics on economic growth, right? You have statistics on economic growth, right? So these are type of things that you look at, right? Now, is there any theories, right? You have to go and try to look, okay, there are so many theories, and normally it's based on finance and growth nexus. Right? Finance and growth nexus. Because financial inclusion is part of finance. So a lot of theories there. Try to read theories and try to pick up, right, what are the first theory, what people explain. Okay, financial inclusions allows people, right, to get access to financings more equally, and hence promote productivity, for example, right? So when you read, that's why I said when you read articles, you will get these theories when you read article, but you put in there regarding the impact of financial inclusions there, right? And any empirical evidence. Now you have to read article, right? Try to get 5 to 10 articles, right? Any empirical evidence, recent articles that you have read, right? And what they found out. Right? Now, once you have read this thing, now this one very important part. Those people have written on those articles. How my article would be different, right? So once you reach at this point, you may have to go back, right? Have sub-objective, for example. I would try to make its difference because I would like to look at the direct impact of financial inclusions, right? Financial inclusions, right, on growth of following existing study. For example, you may come up with certain idea, but also you will look at indirect impact through financial instability, right? Because when you read article, you may find out that there is one article that looked at how financial inclusions affecting financial instability. For example, in one of the research that you have done, you try to look at. So, which means that once you read these articles, theories, and so on, you look at evidence, you can come up with the idea. Here, we'll give you the idea so that you can refine back your information there, right? Your idea, what will make, right, my article difference, right? What are difference, right? And when you all do these things, you should have some idea to list your contributions here. Like what would be your contribution? So these are type of things that you have to write out one by one, right? So you need all these information together. Just put all information together. You may not use all of them in your introductions, but you need them, right? So these are kind of the plots that you have. How you order the plots will come later on, but these are important plots, important elements that you need. So you have to spend 1 week, 2 weeks, try to put all these things in, right? And is data available? Right? Is data available? Yes, what are data that you want to use. Right? And once you have all these things and so on, and why specific countries that you would like to use them, for example, try to answer as much as possible this template that I'm going to provide you, all of you, for you to fill up in 1 week, 2 weeks. Just do some homework to fill this up. This one easy because your hypothesis, but when it comes to number 2, number 3, number 4, it's not easy. Right? You have to read. You cannot just sit down and hope to have the idea. No, you have to read, you have to search, you have to put in, and once you put in, right? When you put in, for example, then you are going to get basically the idea on element that need to be put in. And once everything has been put in there, spend 1 week writing introductions. Right? Do those things for 2 weeks and spend 1 week, committed 1 week, write 2 to 3 pages introductions. Okay? And why I say 1 2 weeks? Because your submissions of introductions only, right? 2 to 3 pages, not more than that, right? Will be by end of this month. So that's what you need to do for our first part, right? For our first part, which means that go back and try to read as much as you can in accordance to your area of work, right? And when you have put all information, you have to sit down, right? Now, see, imagine yourself as a script writer. How should you order this so that the flow is good? Because the idea is that you introduce your topic, you motivate your topic, and then you lead to your objective. Right? Very important part that you have to do in this case. Right? So basically, that's what needs to be done. Right? For examples, right? In this one, I can start with general topics, right? Brings recognized as an enabler of, right, inclusive growth, for examples. I can put in that way, right? Financial inclusions have received substantial, right, policy and empirical attentions, right? So these just introductions in the context of introducing financial inclusions, right, as an impact, right, as and its impact on inclusive growth, right? Now I can bring in, right, from here, for example, look at here. Oh, many countries have adopted this. When they adopted this, since the inception of SDG, right? So I can put here, for examples, right, easily here, because I already get information. The only thing I need to order my writing, right? Since the inception of SDG and the key role of financial inclusions, key role in the achievements of SDGs, many countries have incorporated right, financial inclusions as part of their policy agenda. Right? And based on my reading, for example, according to, for example, who. Right? Let's say according to A and B. Right? I just create them. And in fact, I have an article that said that. Right? According to A and B. Right? So see, when you go and look at this, then you can basically structure your introductions easily. Right? But then I would like you to do first, according to A and B, in what year? Right? 56 countries. Right? Among them, right, for all 56 countries have made financial equations to be the primary, have made financial equations of primary importance. For example, see, what I try to say here is that we try to put as much information to introduce financial inclusions, right, in them. And then later on, right, you can put theoretically. Now you can bring in your critical point of view. Right? Right? So you can put in. Now, second paragraph, you can put theory. Right? So you look at what the theory says. Right? And then, when you say theory, right, now you have to introduce a little bit debate and controversies, because without debate, without controversies, right, what controversy that you try to look at? Are there any counter views in your empirical literature that you read, for examples? Are there any different findings that say financial inclusion is not good for growth? Right? So you have to create that debate, right? Or since you want to focus on OIC countries, for example, you can create the debate also, you can add in, right? You can put, despite the importance of financial inclusions as noted above, of financial inclusions, right, as noted above, it remains low in OIC countries. Right? Now, you can put statistics. Right? What are the statistics in OIC country? And then you can add moreover, little is known on how financial inclusions affect growth in OIC countries. Right? And once you consider these controversies and so on, right, then you can put in, right, basically your objective. See? So what I try to say here is that when you write your introductions, the information should come from here. And that's why I would like you to gather all this information first. And from all these informations, try to write introductions. Right? As much as try to write introduction as best as you can, because the next workshop I will provide you feedback on introductions one by one. I will try to make it clear, because introduction is very important because it provides you the blueprints of what coming up for the whole articles. And that's why I said these are the assignment that you have to do, and you need to do, and you need to basically to work hard for writing introductions, right? Once your introduction is clear, once you are clear on your contributions, once you are familiar with the research work that you try to do, right? Then I think we can proceed to the next steps, right? some of you may face problem because literature may not be a lot, right? May not be a lot, right? But then you have to remember to publish in good journals, right? Research is not something totally 100% new. Research is something built up of what we have known before and try to add more things, right? And that's why we rely on the existing literature to write an articles, right? When it comes to especially empirical work, the work that use data. And I know many of you will use primary data, right? And I'm not well versed in that areas of works, right? But then we have a team from KNEKS that we try to look at how we can help in terms of look at the literature, but then the requirements, even if you use primary data set or secondary data set, will be more or less the same, right? So these are the assignments that I would like to give you in terms of for the next ones, okay? So I think we have quite longer times. I think if I'm not mistaken, we'll stop at 12 Jakarta time, right? And 1 in Malaysian time. So we have 50 minutes. So we have a lot of time for discussions. Right? And I would be happy to answer if you have anything that you would like to ask. You can type or you can ask, right?
Okay, so now we open questions again, Professor. Let me read it for you. Mrs. Ruliato.
We have also in Q&A.
Yeah, but we prioritize the panelist questions first, Professor.
Okay.
Okay. I've already selected questions.
Okay, sure.
Wow. From Mrs. Ruliato. When we will conduct a questionnaire about wakaf or zakat intention, should we only take respondents who pay wakaf or zakat only? Or we can combine respondents who have paid and who never paid wakaf and zakat? Is that clear enough, Professor?
Okay. So for the one in Q&A is from the public.
Oh, no, it was still in the chat box. It's longer before the questions in the Q&A chat.
The one that you have read in Q&A or in the chat box?
To make it easier, I've already selected the questions, Professor, from the chat box and also from the Q&A box.
Okay.
I've already
Okay.
checked that mostly in the Q&A chat, mostly it's from the public attendees, but we have some questions from panelists.
Yeah, can you share the one that you have selected?
Okay. It's because this one. Let me share you my screen, Professor. Can you see the questions number 8?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
When we will conduct a questionnaire about wakaf or zakat intentions, should we only take respondents who pay wakaf or zakat only, or we can combine respondents who have paid and who have never paid, right? Now, see, when it comes to quantitative work, for example, right, quantitative works, and normally when it comes to intentions, whether you pay or not pay, right? And if you want to build the hypothesis, for example, right? You want to build a hypothesis, for example, who have the intention to pay or who is likely to pay or who is not likely to pay, then you have to have both groups, which means your data set must contain both. Someone who pays zakat and who contribute to wakaf, and someone who have never paid who have never contributed to the wakaf, or who never paid zakat. Right? You must have both for you to be able to make comparisons. Right? If you just take for someone who pays zakat on wakaf, then you are not be able to measure what are the likelihood that someone who pays zakat based on the characteristics of the persons. Right? So it's like let's say you in marketing. This is a more related to marketing area works, right? If you want to look at the weather, for examples, right? If you would like to look at weather, for examples, factors that determine someone who buy the product or not buying the product, right? So you have to have both. In that way, you can compute at the end the determinants of intention to buy the products, right? So you have to have both, okay? And if you conduct a comparison between Islamic conventional bank and our result indicate that conventional banking perform relatively better than Islamic bank, right? As proponents of Islamic banking, how should we craft our findings in order not to undermine the growth of Islamic banking itself, right? Now, see, our findings that we have, right? You have to understand the fact that being Islamic doesn't make you to be performing better than others, right? In terms of the business wise, right? It doesn't allow you to perform better than others because being Islamic is not the only characteristics, right? Now, why will you do this type of research? Because regardless of whether we have the result Islamic perform better or Islamic bank perform worse, we would like to get recommendations of what Islamic bank should do, right? Because at the end, right, our work should not stop at Islamic bank perform worse than conventional bank, right? Our work should go one step further. Why Islamic bank perform worse than conventional banks, right? What are the reasons, right? What are the reasons that make Islamic bank to perform worse than conventional banks? And that reasons that you look and try to explain is the one that we need, because that will provide recommendations, right? I do not think that it will undermine the growth of Islamic banking itself, right? But then it will help the growth of Islamic banking because we come up with the fact that, okay, in certain areas, Islamic bank perform worse than conventional banks. Now, you cannot expect that by being Islamic, you will perform better all the times, right? No, the answer will be not, right? Because Islamic bank have many complexity as compared to conventional bank, and sometimes it's expected that Islamic bank will perform worse, right? For example, in terms of efficiency, Islamic bank may be less efficient because of complexity of the products, right? The complexity of the contracts. So if we identify that one to be the case, for example, we can make recommendations, right? So it's basically for me, when I basically work in Islamic banking, for example, I never see that the results, we should get results that look rosy for Islamic bank. Everything is good for Islamic bank. No, right? To improve, we have to find the problems, right? The only conviction that we must have, the Islamic banks that we have now are Islamics. That conviction we have. But how to make this Islamic bank to perform better, and that the research that we must find out, right? So once we get Islamic bank to perform worse than conventional bank is not the end of the story. We are not telling that being Islamic is bad. We are telling that we should improve so that Islamic bank can perform better functions. Right? So sometimes I lost in terms of why people think that Islamic bank should be better than conventional bank all the time. Right? The answer is no. Right? You have to remember they are long established. They have more expertise. They have economies of scale. They are bigger and so on. Right? So you cannot expect that Islamic bank just coming out. How many years? In Malaysia, 1982. Right? 1982. How many years we are here? In Indonesia, what are the first Islamic bank? And now your new Islamic bank just coming up recently from the spin-off or from the conversions, for example. You cannot expect them to perform better, right? But then we need to identify why our Islamic banks are less performing. If our finding as such, right? I will be more concerned if all our findings say that our Islamic bank perform better than conventional bank, because that one will make us to be complacent, not to improve, right? So finding Islamic bank performing not better than conventional bank, for me, is a good thing, because we can look deeper, we can come up with recommendations and so on, right? Because academic journal must, because remember, we are not telling the publics, we are writing for academic journal, we want to have debate there. And the outcome of that debate, we provide policy implications to the public and to the governments so that they can improve Islamic bank, right? So you don't need to worry. What you need to be worried is that you do the right thing, right? And your methods are appropriate. Your research are thorough and convincing. And that one very important that you need to do, right? I have a questions. My research topic is Islamic finance inclusions. Is it possible if I use proxy variables such as financial inclusions, outreach and usage index in selected OIC countries, right, for representations of Islamic financial inclusion itself, right? Because there isn't a specific, right, variable for Islamic financial inclusions, right? There are only proxy variable for financial inclusions, right? So for me, I do not want to, I won't call it as Islamic financial inclusion, I just call it financial inclusions, like financial inclusions, okay? So that's basically what I try to put in, right? The other way that you can do, right? The other way that you can do, for example, you come up with two-stage analysis. Right? Two-stage analysis. What I mean by two-stage analysis here, let me demonstrate here. What I mean by two-stage analysis. Right? The first stage analysis, you take financial inclusions as your dependent variables, right? And this one is a function of, let's say, Islamic banking developments and many others, right? And then in the second stage, right, when you do your analysis, right, you have your variable, let's say, I think OIC countries, you have economic growth. Yeah, you have economic growth. And economic growth is a function of alpha 0 plus beta alpha 1, right? Plus alpha 1. And this one is financial inclusions, but predicted value from the first equations. And then some other determinants, right? And by doing this way, you can evaluate how Islamic banking developments contribute to economic growth through financial inclusions, right? We can discuss, right? I think I would take notes of your paper, right? And I will provide you one article that use more or less the same framework, but different topics, right? Which means they look at the impact of Islamic banking development directly, but they also look at indirectly, right? Which we can borrow from that article, right? So don't call Islamic financial institutions, call just financial institutions, but then you can look at how Islamic banking developments contribute to economic growth directly and also indirectly through financial inclusions. And that one can be done. And I have good article published in Q1 journal that use this type of empirical frameworks, right? So that's why once we clear on our objective, many things can be done. Okay. Any others? Okay. Number 11, right, Chitra?
I'm sorry, I'm muted. Yes, number 11, Professor.
Okay. Okay, the number 11 are topics related to the assumption that Islamic banking in Indonesia is rigid and flexible. What is your view? I'm not sure which topics, but then I think these are more of the debates, popular debate that you have basically, but not so much of the academic work that we can do, whether Islamic bank rigid or flexible, unless you can translate this into hypothesis, right? What are the implications of Islamic banking to be rigid, for example? What are the implications of Islamic banking to be flexible? So those are type of things that you look at, because being rigid, flexible is more of the operations of the bank. But then when it comes to the hypothesis that you have to build, for example, you have to be clear, right? So I'm not sure in terms of what it means by topic related to the assumptions. Now, when we look at, we are not making assumptions, we look at theoretical foundations, theoretical point of view. What Islamic bank, how should Islamic bank behave? And what should be the performance of Islamic bank, for example? Like, let's say, real sector connectivity, right? There's no derivative in Islamic banking, right? There's no connection with any toxic activities, for example, or any toxic instruments in Islamic banking. So that should make Islamic banking more stable. So those are basically theoretical foundations that give rise to hypothesis that we might want to test, like whether it's true or not. If they are not true, what are the reasons? And that one will provide improvement for the banking, right? No, there is, I'm not sure in terms of subject, but I think in terms of research objects, right? Research object is, let's say, what I try to say here in terms of this case, for example, you look at Indonesia, right? Your subject mean the topic, perhaps mean the topic, but the object of your study is Indonesia. What are unit analysis? Your data that you use, for example, you look at Indonesia, but you focus on, let's say, the performance of Islamic bank, and that performance Islamic bank become your unit analysis because you measure that unit, right? So your research objects basically your population that you focus on, unit analysis, your data that you draw from that populations, right? Yeah, if I can say in that way, right? What is the response and motivations of, I'm not sure this one because these are not public lecture, so I cannot answer from non-Muslims, right? Respect and implement Islamic bank, especially in secular countries, right? So I cannot answer. My apology. I cannot answer this. It have to be in different forum because we would like to look more at writing an article, and we have research objective, and I would like to focus more on those. Right? How do you suggest the source of reading? Right now, I think that, as you said correctly, the theoretical works, right? The theoretical work is basically quite difficult to go through with the knowledge that we have, right? Not only for you, but also for me to go through theoretical work. So mostly we do not go through theoretical work, we just go through empirical works, right? Because in the empirical works, for example, they have a lot of, they will have sections, right, that provide you basically one section that provide you explanations why they expect the relation between the variable as such, right, between dependent and independent variable as such, right? So there will be those things, right? And I can give you many articles that have provided those things, right? That have the theories there. You just go to there and try to get the mechanisms and try to write down what are the theory behind it, right? And in fact, there are so many articles. Once you have the idea of what topic that you have, go to empirical work because a lot easier, right? But then if you have, for example, a good understanding of theoretical framework, you can try to read the theoretical paper. But then if it's too difficult, go to empirical paper, because in empirical papers, a good papers, they must have some explanations of the theoretical relation between the variables. From there, you know a lot of hypotheses. Right? For example, right, one study tried to look at portfolio, financing portfolio and bank stability, right? There are empirical work for that, right? Financing portfolio and bank stability, right? That look at basically, for example, exposure to a lot of activities, economies of scopes, for example, theory of economies of scope. So there are theories that has been discussed, right? And theory of diversification of risk that has been discussed. So you see that theoretical work. So you don't need to go into extensive theoretical mathematical work that has been done. You just need to go to theoretical explanations that has been made in the article on how the variables are related, how X affect Y, and so on. So that's what you need to do, right? In terms of looking at theoretical works, right? Is there any others, Chitra? I think you lost the sharing.
Yes, Professor. 1 minute.
Okay. How do you, okay, my paper aimed to investigate the influence of Islamic Bank on the adoption of electronic banking using logistic regressions. Given the number of Indonesian Islamic Bank is only, is it possible, right? Now, logistic regressions, of course, is used whether you adopt or not adopting. And as empirical exercise, of course, you can do, but then to publish would be a little bit more difficult because you have only 33 observations. And you use logistic models, right? So I would say difficult. But then if you want to write them, just a train of how to write, then it's possible, right? Because 33 is not, it's not, I think it's not, I would say it's not a good number for a good art paper or for a good journal articles, right? But if, for example, right? If, for example, you reverse the, you reverse little bit your hypothesis, the impact of electronic banking, on, right, the impact of electronic banking on bank performance, right? If you reverse like that, for example, right, and use panel data, right, and you have measurements of electronic banking adoptions, that one would be quite possible. At least you have more observations because you have panel data, right? But for just looking at whether they adopt or not adopting 33 observations as empirical exercise, yes, but then as a paper to be published in good journals, I would say it's not likely, right? The problem faced by Islamic banking in Indonesia, especially Syariah business unit, is to turn into Syariah commercial bank. However, based on experience and the result of several studies, the financial performance of Syariah commercial bank as a result of spin-off Syariah business unit is not better, especially from efficiency side. And again, this one is not public lecture for me to answer. These are the research questions that we have to do, right? And in fact, I would say these are good research questions, right, that you can start looking at, right? Because I think you can combine, right? You can combine. And one of the area of the work, for example, that you can take a look at, and this area that people have not looked at, for example, right? I hope some of you pick this one up, right? But because these are something that I'm interested to. Islamic bankings, right, are modes of entry, right? Mode of entry, importance, right? Mode of entry. But this study has been done for conventional bank or for foreign bank, right? People have done on similar type of works on foreign banks, right? Because foreign bank can come into a country by establishing new foreign bank or by acquiring the local bank. So they call as greenfields, right? Which means they come in as banks, foreign bank, and establish their branch here, or they come in, they acquired the local bank, right, and make it foreign banks, right? So there are many different modes, and the same thing for Islamic bank, right? Because I observe for Islamic bank, for example, right? This is what I observe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, right? In Malaysia, we have two modes, right? One mode is basically the full-fledged. The other mode is spin-off, right? Spin-off, which means that conventional banks have windows before, and then the government make is a requirement. They have to build, they have to make a spin-off and make subsidiaries, right? And when I look at Indonesia, right? Indonesia, for example, you have full-fledged Islamic bank. You have conventional bank, if I'm not mistaken, but converting into Islamic bank, right? So through conversions, and also you have basically windows of conventional bank and spins off, right? I see the difference when I looked at, because my area is Islamic banking. Now, in this one, also interesting, because I see that conventional bank, they acquire other conventional bank, and they make this conventional bank convert into Islamic bank. Quite interesting. And you can look at many other countries, right? So if you can gather data for many other countries that have this characteristic, for example, Pakistan, because Pakistan also have basically subsidiaries and full-fledged. You can go to Qatar, you can go to others, for example. Then you can look at, for example, for this part, right, which mode of entry, right, which modes of entry are better in terms of making bank, Islamic bank, to serve the society in terms of providing loans or in terms of bank performance, in terms of bank stability and so on. So this would be, I would say, a good research, but then the tough part would be to combine all these informations, right? This one is basically in my back of the mind that some point in time, I would like to do this work, because when I read foreign bank, they also look at the mode of entry of foreign bank, which one is better off. Because as domestic economy, we have to know which one better to invite foreign bank to come in, right? So for Islamic bank, which one is better to establish Islamic bank? If they are not better, what are the problems? How to resolve those problems? So these are type of things that are needed in the context of basically studying Islamic banking, right? So I think good question. Thank you for what you have asked. Very good questions. The next one. Okay. How will the theory be taken? It's just a grand theory. I'm not so sure what it means in this case, right? Now, the theory means the prediction that has been made on the relationship between the variables. So it's not a big grand theory, but then what are theoretical predictions out there? And sometimes theory is also contradicting. And those are type of things that we would like to highlight in our works, right? Okay, regarding the introductions, if we want to ask help for literature, how can we communicate to ask for help? Right? Communicate with the teams, right? And also we are going to have WhatsApps and then email groups, so you can communicate, right? But you can communicate also with the teams, right? As the panelists, can we change our team? Yes, today you can change, but after you submit introductions, hopefully you can stick with your introductions, with your teams, right? See, my paper is about correlation between the value of Maqasid Sharia and cybercrime. The value of Maqasid that can be strategies to plan intention behavior carefully on using e-money, but I have not found exactly the value. Now that's the problem, whether you have data or not. How you build the data on Maqasid Sharia, right? So it's quite not easy, right? So at the end, your work will become conceptual works, right? Which is very difficult, which I'm not good in terms of conceptual works, right? So, but then measurements will be difficult, right? Can we make comparison between countries? The answer is yes, but what are hypotheses, right? Why do you think difference? Because we do not want to make comparison wakaf in Indonesia and wakaf in Turkey, but we do not have certain hypotheses, right? We don't want to come up with the findings that, okay, wakaf in, so I'm not sure in terms of the hypothesis that you try to look at, right? But then as a case study, as I mentioned, for examples, right? A case studies where you have both wakaf in Indonesia and wakaf in Turkey, for example, right? Then you can take a look at you can write case study paper. But if you look at, for example, factors of success or success factors in wakaf in Indonesia and Turkey, and then you can make a comparison, because you can learn what are the success factors of wakaf in Turkey, what are the success factors of wakaf in Indonesia, and then you can draw implications. For examples, can we adopt what are the success factors in Turkey, in Indonesia, and can we adopt what we learned in Indonesia for Turkey? I think that one can be done. As long as you have a hypothesis, try to look at the relationship between the variables, right? So those are basically what I can share with you from the question that has been asked, right? So I will stop here, but then if there anyone else or the team from KNKS, for example, have anything to say regarding the arrangements, because I already give the guideline by the end of the month, and hopefully we meet the deadline, right? Now, remember you have 3 weeks, right? Basically to write 3 pages of the introductions maximum, right? And I will have roughly 2 weeks or maybe less to read all of your proposals, and not only all proposals, and provide feedbacks, not just reading, but provide feedbacks, right? So please take care of that, that I have that commitments, and I would like you to have commitments, right? Because I think I mentioned to you before, right? Successful people, not only they have intelligence, they have some level. You don't have to be supremely intelligent or extremely intelligent. You must have some level of intelligence, right? If you look at Nobel Prize winner, not all of them from Ivy League schools. Right? You must have some level of knowledge, and I believe that all of you have, right? But the second one that will basically drive your success is that you use whatever opportunity that you have to work hard. And you are chosen and mentioned by KNEKS to go through the program, right? And use this opportunity to work hard, right? Bill Gates used the opportunity to be in the labs, right? Why? Because his house is close to one of the university, I forgot which university, and that university is one university at that time have computer labs, because computer at that time so big, right? It's not like our computer right now. They are so big, they have mainframe. But he lived close to that university. So he made a deal with the guard for him to go illegally into the lab and do some coding and learn computers. And he spent nights, hours, like he wake at midnight, go to that computer lab, hours and hours and hours. So which means that he had that opportunity, he used that opportunity. So I hope that all of you use this opportunity, spend your time, right? I do not want to give you one more theory of success from psychology. If you want to be successful, you have to spend 100 hours working, right? I have not reached yet 100 hours writing, right? But then in that article, is the formula is 100 hours. Bill Gates do the same thing. Beatles did the same thing, 100 hours of working. Hard works, pure hard work, right? So that's why I expect that from you in terms of 3 weeks. And I will try to do my best in order to read your article, right? But if you submit me late, the quality of feedback may not be good, right? So I cannot guarantee that, right? But then we'll try to provide you feedback as much as possible. Okay. Okay, I will pass back to the organizer, maybe for the closing for today's sessions, and hopefully useful, and then and hopefully we can communicate and we can discuss further. I think maybe the KNEKS will brief certain things in terms of moving forward regarding the groups, WhatsApp group, and so on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Mansur, for sparing your time to attend this workshop. Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you to fill the attendance list again, so we can share the materials and also the link for downloading the YouTube's live stream and recording of this workshop. And some takeaways from Professor Mansur and also from the committee is that don't forget that the assignment of the workshop series, especially for the selected participants, 74 participants, you have 3 weeks to write your introduction, maximum for 3 pages. And correct me if I'm wrong, you will give a form, yeah, Professor?
Yes, I will give a form. After this, I will just send to the team right away. I think my communication will be Nadia, right? Because she sent to me a lot of documents, so I will send back to Nadia.
All right, okay. Thank you, Professor. And for all the 74 participants, the selected proposals, we will make WhatsApp group and we will inform you further after this. And for information also for the public participants or attendees, you can only join the workshop series for today, and meaning that we cannot open the workshop series again for the next series. So it's only open for public for today's first workshop series. And again, let me emphasize the point that we will facilitate all the participants who will or who wants to find resources or journals or data, something like that. You just communicate with us, and then we, with the committee, the organizing committee, will try to help you to find the articles that you need. And again, try to re-emphasize say about your commitments, because just actually this workshop series is actually like a golden ticket for all of you, especially the selected participants, that we will have about 10 series until the end of the year. So prepare your spirit, prepare your resources, your energy, because we will do the marathon from now on till the end of the year. And the final target, let me remind you that hopefully we can submit the papers into the Scopus index journals. And the final purpose of this workshop is actually we can, hopefully Indonesia can increase their research publications internationally. So I hope, again, all the participants, panelists, or public attendees can take as much as learn so much from Professor Mansur. And for any questions further, just contact us, the committee. And thank you for your participations, for your active discussions, and so on. We are very sorry for all mistakes or any inconvenience during this first workshop series. And yeah, let me close it. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everybody.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Thank you very much, Profesor Mansur.
Thank you,
Terima kasih Profesor
Thank
Mansur,
you
terima
very
kasih Pak
much.
Emi, terima kasih
KNEKS.
Citra, terima kasih Bapak Ibu. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Pak Mansur. Sampai
terima
ketemu
kasih,
2 minggu
sama-sama.
lagi. See you
Ya,
in
ya.
2 weeks, insyaAllah.
3 weeks, yeah.
Okay, 3 weeks.
I get your proposal first, inshallah.
Thank you.